Que tal se você não precisasse mais de uma câmera cara, de um computador, de um software complicado de edição e você...
And some would say controls on the way we use money now. I don't think it's impossible to design a CBDC that wouldn't be able to deal with that. And I think that just say that the issue is, again, to start with what you want to achieve and then see how you deliver the do no harm, rather than start with the things it might do. And it may be we have to start small, and as we learn about the behavioural response of people to having this asset, to go further. If I can make just one last point, talked about the balance of power between central banks and commercial banks, which obviously we're all fascinated by. But it's not that long ago, and actually I could even remember it, when if I wanted to use a credit card, somebody rolled a roller over a piece of paper with 4 sheets of carbon to do that. And I couldn't use a credit card to buy my coffee, and sometimes I couldn't use a cheque below £30, which was a much higher value in those days than it is today. The balance of power, if you like, what we see now in the use of commercial backed money in everyday life is just a huge shift that's occurred over the last 25 years. And these things move backwards and forwards. There is no, the book of Genesis didn't have within it a division between central banks and commercial banks. It evolves with technology and it will continue to evolve. We have to ensure it evolves in a way that meets our public policy objectives.
Well, I can say that you have now thoroughly done something that I had not anticipated, which was introducing theology into the central bank digital currency debate. Chris, I think that Giancarlo, I think that one of the interesting conversations here, I mean, the United States, the way in which we sort of oversee our financial system, our monetary system is quite interesting because we have obviously the Fed board and then we have the regional banks. And then even added to that, we have a very active and a very large sort of banking system. Even as chairman of the CFTC, you had talked a good deal about what an ideal sort of interaction would be in order to tackle some of the design questions, even once the government sort of creates or articulates what kind of values it would have. We were talking to Mark Branson, who had laid out sort of how he thinks about that kind of coordination between, in the case of the Libra Association, but also other cryptocurrency founders and technologists, sort of the ideal relationship between the state and different sort of cryptocurrency actors. When it comes to the CBDC question, how do you see that playing out in an American context in a more fragmented monetary system?
We talked about values, and John actually talked about the book Genesis, and that comes back to what I began the conversation with, and that is that, how does society enshrine its social values into its money? And in fact, another conversation I had with John not too long ago, he said to me, it seems like every several generations, society asks the same question again: what is money? And I think we're at one of those points in time because of this new technological revolution in terms of the internet of value and the digitization of things of value, that we're once again asking the question, what is money? And it's not just central banks that are asking the question. Society at large is asking the question. In fact, we can think back 10 years, it was really Bitcoin that really started us down this road. And then it was other things like the pandemic, like China, and like Libra coin that have gotten all of us. And so I think there's a broad conversation going on right now that's not confined to the official sector. I think it's very much an official sector, public sector conversation. And so one of the things we're trying to do in the States at the Digital Dollar Project is bring together the conversations that are taking place in the official sector and the work that's being done in the private sector so they can benefit from each other. And in fact, that approach is consistent with the American tradition of the way we explored the lunar surface. It's consistent with the way the internet was developed with the DoD and DERPA, but also with the private sector actively involved in the development of the internet. And I think that as the United States goes forward in looking at a central bank digital currency, it's going to engage more directly with the private sector. And we at the Digital Dollar Project just last week put forward our proposals for a series of pilot programs that we think can explore both the retail use of this, but also wholesale use of this in different use cases. And I commend your viewers to take a look at that. It's on our website, digitaldollarproject.org. And we ourselves at the Digital Dollar Project in the next few weeks will be announcing a project that we're going to work on to start experimentation in this area. And we've been engaged with the official sector throughout, with the Federal Reserve Bank and with Treasury and other government agencies, because we want to really see this very rich communication between the private sector and the public sector. And I'll just end on this note. You know, I mentioned that's a U.S. tradition, but if you look around the world, that's what's happening in most of the other projects as well. Certainly China is engaged very much with its commercial actors in the development of their DEP. And I think that that's very much the way that this will continue to develop in the United States.
Yeah, you know, we only have a couple of minutes, but Chris brought up the big issue out there with China and particularly with their involvement with their CBDC project. You know, very briefly, I would like to get each of your sort of your opinions about whether or not, number one, how do you view this project in terms of how advanced it seems, and then what do you think it's doing to the conversation on CBDCs domestically for other countries that are looking about their own values and also thinking through what kind of money and monetary system they would like to have? We'll go in reverse order this time. Since you brought it up, Chris Giancarlo, we'll start with you.
Well, you know, I actually think that if you categorize, as you often see in the press, the development of CBDC as a race, then they'll often talk about China's advanced start, and obviously Sweden as well, but they've defined it in terms of who goes first. I actually think that's the wrong way to look at this. I don't think if there's a winner, I don't think the winner is necessarily who's first and the loser is necessarily who's last. What matters is which central bank successfully incorporates its societal values in a successful development of CBDC. So it's not a question of going first, not a question of going last, but it's a question of success in making sure that a CBDC has those values associated with it. And that's our focus in the US. Now, on the other hand, one can't be too late to the game here. And that's why we very much advocate that, at least in the US context, that the United States really get in the game and get active in the game in a way that it is increasingly, but perhaps it wasn't as much 6 months ago. So we're very pleased to see the United States accelerate its work in this because of interoperability. The last thing the world needs is for the United States to not be engaged and then wake up 3 years from now and suddenly say, oh, we are going to engage. And oh, by the way, we want to go in a different technological direction. We're going to not be concerned with some of the interoperability aspects. So the United States needs to be engaged now. But ultimately, it's about incorporating those values into a successful deployment of CBDC.
Cecilia, China, 30 seconds.
I think it's just a very excellent example of how a digitalized economy makes us all have to ask how we serve societal needs in the best possible way. This is digitalization that changes people's behaviors, changing the landscape of the monetary system. China seems to be on the forefront. We also have to do our homework in terms of cash disappearing rapidly. And we're just going to have to carry on. And it's going to have to be quite a rebuilding of the infrastructure and a little bit of a change between public influence and private sector influence before we get it where we want it to be.
John?
Yeah, so first of all, I agree entirely with Chris that the wrong way to look at this is to feel this is some form of race. And the Chinese actually were the first, I think, with paper money, so maybe they'll be the first with a digital currency. The key is whether you can meet your societal needs and your economic needs and find a way to reflect that. And I think given the way the world is and national jurisdictions operate, this will be first and foremost a set of domestic issues. Where we have a real opportunity, though, is unlike other periods of change in money and development of national infrastructure for payments, we actually have the opportunity now to ensure that we don't build in unintended barriers to interoperability in all the forms that Benoit discussed. And where we choose to limit interoperability, that's an actual choice we make, rather than, as what's happened in the past, our systems have evolved, and it's just been very difficult to achieve some of the gains we could get through managed and responsible interoperability. So I really think we have an opportunity, but you start from how do you deal with the needs in your own society and your own economy, while trying to be aware of what you do to make sure you retain the optionality on interoperability.
Well, our time is up, but I'll let Benoit have the very last word.
Well, I would also agree that it's not a matter of competition with China. So if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you want to pick a fight with China, you can pick a fight on CBDC, but it's not about CBDC. It's something different. And when we discuss international cooperation over CBDC at the BIS in Basel, PBOC is very much part of it. We have a very good and intense discussions and relations with CBDC. And when you look at the DCEP project in China, it's primarily a domestic project. It's not a geopolitical project. And the way I would say it is that they have these big tech players, which are becoming fintech players or big tech in finance, with huge networks, and they want to be on top of it. The authorities want to remain on top of it, and authorities want to be sure that digital currency, whichever way it is being done, serves public objectives in China. And that it's the same conversation everywhere. The objectives might be different, obviously, but the kind of conversation will be the same everywhere. And so there are lots of lessons to learn from their experience.
Well, thank you so very, very much. I mean, that topic in and of itself, I know is a big one when against the backdrop of the internationalization of the yuan and the like, but thank you so very much. This kind of conversation is vital. It's necessary, and just having you here for our audience is what DC FinTech Week is about, and I appreciate all of your time to come. You have been wonderful, both on camera and off with me, and I just wanted to thank you again for making the time. And I guess we will now be switching to our next panel. But before we do, we're about to make this jump now from CBDCs to non-governmental currencies and what they mean for the market. But before we do, I want to introduce our poll for the day. So shout out to Chainalysis for the support. The question is, for the audience, what, if anything, is stopping you from investing in cryptocurrency? Not CBDC, in cryptocurrency. And you can go to slido.com to input your opinion with the code DC FinTech. And we will, again, DC FINTECH, and we'll provide the results for those who do. And with this audience, I'm pretty sure there will be more than a little curiosity. And with that, we are going to continue our conversation with one of the big draws of the day, Brad Garlinghouse. Now, Brad is, as many of our viewers know, the CEO of Ripple, and he is an alum of DC FinTech Week, where he wowed the audience in 2019 and was very, very popular. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to get his views on not only our earlier conversation on CBDCs, but also the evolving regulatory environment more generally for cryptocurrencies and for blockchain projects. Brad, thank you so much for coming back.
Chris, it is great to be here again. The two quick short comments. One is I'm amazed every year. You guys do such a great job. That last panel, I think, was indicative of the caliber of people and the caliber of conversation. So congrats. The second thing I think it's worth noting, it is good to see you again. It's been a year. And in some ways, I think it's just interesting to think about how much has changed in that year. And in some ways, as I think we'll probably discuss in our discussion today, it's amazing in some ways how little has changed. And I particularly think about some of the regulatory stuff here in the United States when I say that. But it's great to be back. Great to see you again. And thanks for hosting me.
Well, this is great. Well, I think you're already kicking off a good sort of line of conversation. I mean, a year ago, when we were here in Washington, D.C., we were talking a little bit about Ripple's move to our nation's capital. And as you said, there's certainly been a lot that has changed. And then there's obviously been a good deal that hasn't. Obviously, the coronavirus has impacted everyone here in the city and around the world. But besides sort of that particular exogenous event, I mean, what have you learned and seen about Washington? You're getting to the regulatory issues that you may not have either learned or known or fully appreciated, and what has sort of struck you to be the most sort of memorable aspect of this last year?
To get that last part, kind of caught me thinking the most memorable aspect. I might have to think on that for a minute, but the thing I probably learned, I think Silicon Valley in general has had a deserved reputation of being kind of late and engaging in Washington. And I think in some ways, the crypto community in Washington, hasn't been as active. And I think as we, Ripple, certainly have gotten more active, I've definitely learned some things. And in some ways, I've learned that the U.S., from a regulatory point of view and from a legislative point of view, is very open to new technologies, is very open to how these technologies can be applied to benefit real people. Not just the trading, not just the speculation, but actually how do we apply these in a way that actually can benefit people? And certainly that's been true for Ripple. I've also, I suppose, to be fair and maybe a little glass half empty, the wheels of legislative process and even regulatory process move quite slowly. And, it's been 2.5 years since, Bitcoin was declared not a security and Ether was declared not a security. And yet, other than, some enforcement actions on the, more, I'll call abusive side, we still have a lack of clarity, and there's lots of examples of that we could talk about.
Yeah, just from a culture standpoint, certainly, I guess we haven't been traveling quite as much as we used to. But is there something that you see in terms of just the cultural makeup and backup of the two cities that has been interesting when it comes to how one talks about, cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, blockchain infrastructures, and the like? I've always made the joke that, when it comes to crypto, Silicon Valley makes it, New York trades it, and DC regulates it, and they all have problems sort of talking to one another. I mean, is there something about it that you've seen, and it plays itself out either in the regulatory process or in California out when it comes to the market sort of design process?
Look, I've been, over the course of the last year, in the last couple of years, I've been kind of outspoken on some of these points. I've been in Silicon Valley for 20 plus years, and I've been, I think, part of the fabric of the evolution of the internet. And it's interesting to me sometimes that the Silicon Valley community sometimes I don't think fully appreciates some of the things it could do better. Expressions like move fast and break stuff, or even Uber's approach at times, I don't find that to be as constructive as it could be. And I think that has informed, that has created a culture at Ripple of, we have very specifically tried not to be, quote, disruptors, but rather, how do we be constructive? How do we work with the system? How do we work with regulators? And that has really paid dividends for us in many countries around the world. And I think that we have seen an incredibly positive reaction, incredibly positive engagement from regulators around the world. But as we've already talked about, in the U.S., I think it was last week or the week before, the Department of Justice put out a 70+ page paper about some dynamics in crypto. And in the document, it references 8 different groups within the U.S. government that have some sort of opinion about how crypto should be viewed, how crypto should be regulated. And the challenge is for companies operating here in the United States, it's really hard to know. You can't have regulation. It's a guessing game. We Ripple take it very seriously. We take KYC requirements, BSA requirements, AML requirements very seriously. But when regulation's a guessing game and you have different parts of the government saying different things, that makes it really hard to operate here in the United States. I suppose, made some headlines over the course of the last week, about should we continue to be based, should Ripple, the company, continue to be based here in the United States?
I was about to get into that. Yeah, exactly.
And look, I'm a U.S. citizen. I grew up in Kansas. Ripple's a proud U.S. company for sure. But, we find ourselves in this situation where it's not a level playing field for what Ripple is doing in the XRP community is doing. It's really not a level playing field, and that I have to, think about that implication, for the company.
Okay, so let's sort of think a little bit more concretely about that, and sort of the international dimensions of, whenever you're working in digital finance is very often a cross-border business, right? You have people either moving money from one country to the other. Sometimes talent can be distributed across different kinds of locations, and so business plans are inherently, international, something that we've already talked about at length earlier today. Maybe you could just sort of walk us through a little bit from your seat at the top of Ripple, what that looks like in practice. I mean, you had made some very interesting remarks about China. We talked about China with our earlier leaders panel from government, and you had noted not just the regulatory sort of challenge in the United States in terms of there being a very sort of heterogeneous sort of mixture of regulators, but you were also noting from a technology standpoint just how advanced some countries were becoming, especially as it turns or as it relates to crypto. What does that mean for a company like yours that's working really at the sort of cutting edge of digital finance? I mean, what does it mean in terms of the friction and the choices that not just Ripple, but really any company that's dynamic has when trying to decide where to do business, how to do business, and what kind of cost reward trade-off is in that mix?
Right. So I think, like any investment, you think about how do I maximize potential upside, but minimize risk. And I think that when you have certainty and you know how to invest, then that minimizes some level of risk. Your earlier panel was talking a lot about China. I love the Book of Genesis reference. The way I think about the China dynamic, it's not that I disagreed with the panelists, it's that I think about it a little bit more broadly. It's not just about CBDCs. When I think about this, China has been incredibly strategic. When they look at crypto and they look at blockchain, they've been very strategic. Premier Xi has actually come out and said, blockchain investment is, a critical priority. And, they have made huge progress on the CBDC, just airdropping 10 million of their digital yuan to citizens in Shenzhen. It's like they are making real progress here. And I know that the previous panel, I think fairly kind of says, well, look, it's not really about who's first, it's about how does it mesh well. But we got to also remember, it's not just what China has been doing to the CBDC. Today we sometimes gloss over the fact that there is risk, and we talk about centralized and decentralized in these various technologies. Bitcoin mining is 65 to 75% controlled by Chinese miners, and I think it's hard not to argue that the Chinese Communist Party does not have the opportunity to have control there. I'll take kind of I suppose, alarmist point of view, but what happens if Premier Xi loses $1 million in Bitcoin? You don't think that the Chinese Communist Party has the opportunity to affect a change to the Bitcoin blockchain and make a reverse Premier Xi's $1 million loss of Bitcoin that might have been hacked? So I think that's true for Bitcoin, that's true for ETH. That's of course leaving aside the massive energy dynamics and pollution dynamics that we see with Bitcoin and ETH. But it's concerning to me that we here in the United States have given those technologies an advantage, and it goes back to the certainty of the investment you're asking about. Just last week, I was speaking with a developer here in San Francisco, and he was talking about investing and building upon ETH as a development platform. And one of the reasons he cited is, look, there's certainty and clarity about the regulation around ETH. So would I invest in or build upon a different stack when there's not certainty. You know, that's a real issue. And I think you see governments like the UK, like Singapore, like Japan, the UAE, or even Switzerland. These are all really good examples where regulation has provided the clarity of the regulation has provided the ability for a healthy market to develop in a holistic view. And that I think helps, you know, companies like Ripple, companies that, you know, want to invest.
You know, when you think about the amount of development in crypto, I think that a lot of people, when it comes to national competitiveness, will think, well, you know, one country, this is a new technology, so the barriers to entry are low enough that perhaps it's, you know, countries can play catch up. You know, better than almost anyone, you know, what it takes to be a cutting edge actor in this space. You know, when you think about sort of the competition within, again, not just CBDC, but really crypto and even blockchain writ large, and supporting softwares and digital infrastructures, I mean, how accurate is that? How easy or hard is it for an entrant to play catch up and to be competitive? What does that usually take?
You know, I think it's a really important and good question. I think it kind of, as you know, came up in your earlier panel in the context of, you know, is it important to be first or important to get it right? And where there are not network effects, where there are not kind of effects that are kind of the flywheel, then I totally agree that whether you're first, whether you're second, whether you're 10th, the ability to play catch up, I think, you know, no big deal. There are dynamics, though, that kind of what I'll loosely call network effects, where the liquidity of an asset, right? So the fact that Bitcoin is the most liquid digital asset is a good thing. And once you have that, that's helpful to the Bitcoin community. Look, by the way, you know, as much as I get accused of being, you know, anti-Bitcoin, I own Bitcoin. I'm bullish on Bitcoin for sure. So I think that it's important to understand that those advantages that can start because of an uneven playing field, it's not just, oh, okay, now we're gonna level the playing field and it's gonna reset to normal. The longer those advantages are in place, the more the competitive dynamics and almost the moats are created. And I think that's hard to overcome. And I think that's where I think China is looking at a very long, not just, you know, a decade out, but maybe a century out, and making sure that, look, these underlying technologies really are going to be the underpinnings of the Internet of Value. And it's going to change the way transactions around cross-border money movement works, certainly where Ripple is focused, but it's going to change how other transactions work as well. And I think China is being very smart and very strategic by investing in this and by having a very significant stake in it. And, you know, I think it's going to be a challenge just to, you know, hey, the U.S. now has a level playing field with these other technologies. And I'm not even just talking about, you know, how that benefits the XRP community, you know, but others that are doing interesting things that are being responsible players and working with regulators that I think, you know, all we're asking for is that level playing field.
You know, it's really an interesting and important conversation. I mean, you know, China is their approach is not only domestic, but they do have and have thought about how do you create sort of a digital infrastructure overseas. There's been a longstanding conversation about the internationalization of its currency, and it's interesting how those kinds of things intersect with how they build out their money. I mean, have you been struck by just how much in this last year, since we last talked at FinTech Week, you know, how much that CBDC conversation has taken off, and what do developments in those pockets of the ecosystem mean for Ripple and for XRP?
Well, I have been impressed and frankly even surprised. You know, I have commented publicly. I was at Davos World Economic Forum event this past February or January, I guess, in Davos. And I remember one of the first comments I got when I was there. I was walking down some stairs, and a regulator from another country walked by. I was like, "Oh, you're nice to see you." And his comment to me was, "You know, crypto is still a bad word here." And I thought, that's interesting. I mean, it's a tough way to start the conference. But what's interesting is today, what we have seen and the conversations Ripple is having with various central banks around the world is about 70% of central banks are really looking seriously at this technology. And so I think that is indicative of how that world is changing. Now, that being said, that definitely, I think, is a constructive thing for Ripple and for the XRP community. Just having a central bank issued digital currency still does not solve the dynamic of needing to settle a transaction, settle a payment between the Argentinian peso and the Australian dollar. Having really simple transaction dynamics, both on the messaging and on the liquidity, is still critical to make that work to really enable the internet of value we think about and we talk about. So I actually see it in some of the work we are doing with central banks around the world. I think it's a very positive dynamic. And okay, I think it's still unclear to me exactly how central bank issued digital currencies, your last panel talked about this, what problems are they solving? Is it circumvention of some of the existing commercial banking infrastructure? How do those dynamics play out? Look, I don't know. What I do know is regardless of how that plays out, you still need a lot of, you need a neutral asset that doesn't carry that baggage as a central bank issued digital asset. And XRP as extremely efficient on the speed, extremely efficient on the cost per transaction, and the scalability is really well suited to help solve that, which is why Ripple has invested where we have.
Tying all that together, tying it together with your original question of the competitiveness of the United States and sort of business and strategic decisions that you have to make every day, and then against the backdrop of what has changed dramatically since we last talked, the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, what has or how has the coronavirus pandemic, how has it impacted your business strategy? As the leader of Ripple, and what are you looking at, and what should we be looking at in the next 12 months from you?
Yeah. So look, I think there's no doubt the pandemic has impacted lots of parts of the economy, and certainly it has impacted Ripple. And in some ways, it's impacted us in a very, very positive way. And in some way, it's made our jobs harder. At the core, a big part of what Ripple does is, we sell financial technology. We sell that underlying kind of plumbing to financial institutions, banks, payment providers. And, that certainly, we continue to sign up a lot of new customers, and still averaging kind of, about 2 a week, which is great. But that is a little bit slower than we were at the beginning of the year in January, and that is a lot because you can't show up to the Bank of Chris and the Bank of FinTech Week or whatever we want to call it. It makes the sales process a little higher friction. Now, on the other hand, the dynamics of the pandemic have highlighted some of the huge gaps in our financial infrastructure. From moving from cash to digital, and I think it highlights how some of the unbanked and underbanked have been left behind by what's happening globally, and so. That coupled with, massive inflation of fiat currencies, that's really good for the crypto industry at large. It's not at all a surprise to me to see that the broader crypto market overall, according to, the sources I think you and I both looked at, it's up somewhere around 90% this year. And I'm pretty bullish about what the next year or 2 or 3 looks like for the crypto market at large. And that's largely because when you print as much fiat stimulus, fiat currencies as we're seeing globally, that will lead to inflation. It does devalue those fiat currencies. And so I think you obviously gold doing very well, you see crypto doing very well, and I think that'll continue to be the case.
We only have a minute or two left, but I did want to, when we were talking about the different cultures of the East Coast and the West Coast, and you're talking about financial inclusion, one of the things that I did notice, and I've been, which certainly has caught my eye, is that Ripple's been a little bit ahead of the game, particularly when it comes to conversations on diversity, and actually called out pretty explicitly Ripple's intent to diversify its board. From people here on the East Coast, maybe in Washington, D.C. and in New York, this sounds a lot like something that's not just sort of morally justified, but pretty good business. But why, has it been harder, to have that conversation, culture-wise in Silicon Valley? And just wrapping things up, I mean, what made you feel like this was the right call and worth making sense when you're sitting here navigating CBDCs and cross-border payments and competitiveness of the United States and regulatory issues and the like?
Chris, I'm glad you asked about this. As I mentioned earlier, I've been out in this part of the world for 20 plus years. I've seen the tech community kind of go through a number of different undulations. And the thing I feel very strongly and kind of very deeply as I think about the Ripple culture is I think we have actually an obligation to lean in. I think we have an obligation to be a part of the solution for some of the macro problems we see. And, I think that the saddest part of that for me is I see tech companies that I think have, if not, well, at best, they've exacerbated some of those problems. And so we have, I think, from the origins of the company, tried to lean into that. One example I'll give real quickly, and I know we're running out of time here, is, we made a big announcement recently about going carbon neutral and making sure the XRP ledger is carbon neutral. And at the same time we're making those announcements, I find it interesting that Square is out there exclusively supporting Bitcoin, which again, I think let's remind ourselves, Bitcoin mining consumes 1% of global energy consumption. Wow. How can a company, and I think all of us at our corporate environments, I think Square should be thinking about what is the carbon footprint of that decision. Now, I happen to know that one of the reasons why Square looks at that way is because there is regulatory certainty about Bitcoin. And as we look at other companies looking at this space, they look at what is the regulatory certainty. And so it's ironic, in my opinion, the US has made decisions which are actually exacerbating things like global warming by virtue of supporting this heavily mining intensive stuff. Anyway, I know I'm a little bit off your core question. Suffice it to say, Ripple has and will continue to invest in making sure we have diversity at all levels of the company. We've been really fortunate to have some fantastic women on the board. We did join the recent pledge to add a person of color to the board of directors, and we are working on that very actively right now, and hope to have an announcement soon.
Well, congratulations, and thank you so very much for your time, Brad, both from last year and also showing up again this year. It's really interesting, and as always, I learned a lot.
Chris, thanks for having me again. Hope to see you again next year.
Absolutely.
My name is Marco Dell'Erba. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Zurich and a fellow at New York University School of Law. This paper is Crypto Shadow Banking as part of a broader project on the transformative stages of capitalism. And the key question is whether crypto finance is leading to a revolution or an evolution. Shadow banking has contributed to the financial crisis of 2008, and after that there was a regulatory reaction and a technological reaction. Focusing on the technological reaction, the creation and implementation of the blockchain system with Bitcoin and multiple transformations has led to the emergence of new financial networks that I identify as shadow central banking and crypto shadow banking. Now the question is whether shadow banking and crypto shadow banking have any similarities and what we can do from a policy perspective. Shadow banking is a network of financial institutions and financial instruments where assets, often illiquid, are spread to investors in the form of mortgage-backed securities, CDOs, repos, and securitizations because of the actions of institutional investors such as money market funds and pension funds acting as conduits. Looking at the causes of its establishment, we can see that there was a high quality collateral scarcity, and this was a major problem. The regulation of financial services and banking regulation contributed to enhance the establishment of shadow banking, and there was a downward pressure on regulated institutions from not regulated ones that could more easily and systematically implement financial engineering in their business models. This has led to the emergence of problems such as excessive leverage, conflict of interest and opacity, liquidity and counterparty risks, and too big to fail problems. Looking at crypto shadow banking now, we could say that it is also a network of financial institutions and financial instruments. Digital assets are distributed to investors via tokenizations instead of securitizations, crypto derivatives, and crypto structured products that will likely develop in the near future. Here, there are new institutional investors. Stable coins replace money market funds, crypto hedge funds, and crypto lending platforms also contribute to spreading these financial instruments. The causes of its establishment are rather different, but there is a financial need consisting in the demand for faster and informal means of investment, favored by a slow regulatory response. And the competition here is towards traditional banks, asset managers, and service providers, such as prime brokers and custodians, as well as shadow banking. The innovation here is in the dual form of the dual layer of financial engineering coupled with technological infrastructural innovation. Let's look at the problems generated by crypto shadow banking. Excessive leverage and opacity originate from short selling and margin trading, commonly known also in the traditional shadow banking, as well as new instruments such as perpetual swaps that allow for leverage up to 100 times. Crypto lending also is a reason for opacity because centralized platforms are inherently less transparent than decentralized ones. Liquidity risks in crypto shadow banking originate from the quality of tokenized assets, generally very illiquid, as well as the risk emerging from stablecoin reserves and the way they are invested in illiquid assets. We can observe a general lack of crypto assets rating, as well as a problem in the regulation of market infrastructures. If you think about crypto exchanges, you will realize how they are invading new businesses beyond the natural function of creating new markets. So we are observing, even in this context, the emergence of too big to fail entities that have a dominant position. What we can think about all these? Well, this is a very new context, but is posing, however, very old problems. And what regulators can do? Well, they should try to think about the existing tools in order to address in the best way all these problems and contribute to the establishment of a sustainable digital finance framework for the future. Thank you so much. I look forward to receiving your question via email or other channels.
Well, that was a really interesting presentation and one that is of relevance for many of us watching. And I'm delighted to transition into a conversation with relevance for almost all of us, which is with Brian Brooks, the acting the acting comptroller of the currency, who's really been at the forefront of a number of initiatives that have worked to reshape the conversation on cryptocurrency here in the United States. And with it, really conversations on banking and the business of banking. Brian, thanks so much for making it.
Chris, thanks for having me. It's a great to see you here, even with the screen in the middle of it.
Right. Thank you so much. I think we can just jump right into it and talk about some of your agency's work on crypto. I mean, you have been, I think busy is an understatement for really the work that you've been able to do in the last couple of months. And recently you issued a letter clarifying how banks can provide custody services for customers' crypto assets. And in that letter, you sort of clarified that where banks can hold reserves that back stable coin held in sort of hosted wallets, there were certain kinds of standards that were announced. I mean, why were those moves necessary and what did they accomplish?
Well, so Chris, first of all, thanks for that question. And I'm really glad that you're spending some time on crypto here, because I think that the macro thesis of crypto and the future of crypto is probably not well enough understood or thought about enough by people who are in kind of mainstream finance. So I'm going to kind of come at it from that perspective. What we're trying to do with these letters is to solve the problem of banks over the last 4 or 5 years have basically treated crypto as though it was like a pawn shop or, as some other kind of, or, a drug dispensary, some other kind of disfavored business that can't be touched. And the truth of the matter is that, like with any new financial asset, there are very, very strong positives. I'll talk about those in a second. There are also risks, and government has just not said enough about either the positives or the risks to create any kind of a safe framework in which banks felt comfortable operating. And so what we're trying to do is to, on the one hand, clearly articulate where we think the most important risks are. And, among others, we think those are in the world of money laundering and BSA compliance and terrorism financing. Those are real risks, hence the language about hosted wallets. But on the other hand, we also do see a future where decentralization is very likely an unstoppable force out there. Decentralized networks, by definition, are cheaper, faster, and more resilient than any kind of centralized structure. And now that the technology exists to make that possible, it seems not only good, but inevitable that those things will arise. So our point was, let's identify the risks. Let's also articulate that we believe there are strong use cases for these things, and banks should feel free to participate so long as they can adequately manage risk. Weirdly, no financial regulator has ever said that before. So you'd think this would be easier than it is, but that's where we are. And there's a lot more we need to say about this. There are certain kinds of tokens out there that present privacy and law enforcement issues. We should opine on what we think about those things. There are stablecoin projects, located abroad that may or may not present monetary policy challenges to central bankers. All of these things need some attention on our part, and our hope is to be able to go through those one at a time.
I know you well enough to know that you've got to have bigger ideas. I know that you have bigger ideas about crypto than the custody, crypto custody and stablecoin deposits. And as I said, this goes to questions not only about this particular product, but about banks and banking and the like. So from that standpoint, from that financial standpoint, you had sort of signaled what's the big picture in your mind for crypto's use case in terms of the federal banking system. Our earlier panels, some with our earlier panel coming from Asia, as well as with some conversations with central bankers in different parts of the world, we're trying to opine sort of what the use case would be, also in light of the values of different countries that could be potentially issuing them. But when you think about a stable coin, and crypto more generally, what kind of use cases do you see, and what are the next big steps for crypto in the federal banking system?
Yeah, well, so look, there are a number of different theses for different kinds of crypto projects. In the same way that, I always point out the fact that I've got 5 or 6 different communication apps on my phone, right? And they do all convey information, but they're all different. I have, I might have WhatsApp for a reason that's different from email. They're both places I can type information, but I use one sometimes for certain things and others sometimes for different things. So the way I think about it is at the most basic level, we have banks for the same reason that we have the post office. It's for a historically vestigial reason, okay? Once upon a time, in a pre-technology era, the only way to move money or information from point A to point B was to take all of the money or all of the information and aggregate it in one place, and then you could lend it out to some people and you could collect payments from other people all in that central hub. That's why, if you think back to the medieval origin of banking, it was really to finance the great wars of Europe, where you might have a king of England trying to finance a war with the Duke of Padua or whatever, and they didn't know each other, and the people who wanted to finance that didn't know each other, and you needed some central trusted ledger keeper. That was necessary at a time when we didn't have technology, but now we have technology, which may mean that we don't necessarily need either the service of a central ledger keeper or the aggregation of all the money in one place to be borrowed and lent, because the technology makes it immediately possible for you and me to transact directly, even if we don't know each other. We used to need banks for that, but now we have technology for that. And so at the most basic level, that's what's going on. When you talk about stable coins versus when you talk about Bitcoin versus when you talk about privacy tokens, these are all doing different things, much like the communications apps on our phone. So if you ask me what's the thesis for Bitcoin, the thesis for Bitcoin is, 1 day, it's possible that America and Europe and other places will will adopt monetary policies that look like Venezuela's monetary policy, and government-issued currency will no longer have value because it will be debased, right? As Brad said on your previous conversation, at some point there will be real inflation in the system. So that's the thesis of Bitcoin. It's not supposed to do anything other than be rationed. That's its core value. Stablecoins are kind of different. The idea of stablecoins are, hey, we could take something that has a knowable value. We could either back it based on an algorithmic activity, or we could back it based on dollars in the bank. But we could take this thing that we know has value and we could internetify it, right? We could make it so that it's programmable and instantaneous and doesn't rely on the internal workings of a bank to transact. So it's like we know people want this because they already sign up for Zelle and Venmo. But the problem is Zelle and Venmo aren't interoperable with each other. They're closed loop kinds of systems. Stablecoins are all about the concept of the internet, fully interoperable. You don't have to be on Zelle to receive a Venmo payment, right? Here, I can transact with anybody who's connected to the internet, and that's a good thing for stablecoins. And then ultimately, really, Chris, I think the real use case of crypto is in a world of increasing integration and increasing globalization. It really makes no sense to think that anyone across borders who wants to transact with each other has to pay a foreign exchange fee to change yen into dollars, let's just say, and then also to pay a money transmitter for the act of hitting the send button and sending that money across a proprietary platform. Imagine if there was a single token that was recognized on both sides of that divide. And when you received it, you could cash it out into your local currency. And when I received it, I could cash it out into my local currency without the need to change it, right? Those kinds of things occupy so many trillions of dollars of friction in the system that it's, when people say there's no killer app to crypto, I sort of think, no. The killer app of crypto is the simplest application, which is avoiding frictions. That's what it's all about, much as the internet did for sending information.
You talked about sort of, or you conceive and think about the use case for crypto, really from the standpoint of decentralization combined with, I guess, a kind of interoperability, especially in the case of stable coins. But writ large, I guess crypto then is obviously one of those tools fueling the decentralization of finance or DeFi. And you've observed on many occasions that the other sort of force reshaping banking is something that you describe as unbundling, right? And that really goes to what you were just mentioned in terms of the historical sort of evolution of the origins of banking, and now you're trying to sort of identify or think through what banking looks like now. But I think let's try to go that direction a little bit more explicitly. What does banking look like for you after unbundling? Sort of post DeFi. What do you see from an operational standpoint in terms of the place of banks, right, in the banking system, and literally what it means to be a bank, and then what do you think consumers would then be able to look forward to, and the challenges that arise?
Yeah. So Chris, here's how I think about it. And I think you're exactly right when you say, what does it mean to be a bank? Because I think the nomenclature sometimes gets in the way of having this conversation. So let's start with first principles here. Human beings need financial services. They don't need banks. Banks are entities that exist among other entities to provide financial services to people. So when I say that, what do I mean people need financial services? Well, it's like most of us could not afford to buy a house if we had to pay cash for it. You have to be super rich to be able to just write a check for your house. And so we need someone else to float us that money for a period of time, and we're willing to pay them a rate of interest on it. So we need lending like that. Businesses sometimes need leverage in order to achieve target rates of return. So again, they need to borrow money from someplace in order to do that. People need to go to college. That costs money. Many of us take out student loans to go to college. Or, we need to pay the babysitter and we want to write her a check or send her money from an account. So we need some place to process that payment, but we also need some place to hold our money in some safe way, which we call deposits typically. Those are things we need to live our lives. The companies that have historically served those needs are called banks. But the reason that those were the kinds of companies who served those needs was because, again, in a pre-technology era, we needed one place to hold all of the money in order for it to be efficient to provide all of those other services. And so banks could gather deposits on a low cost basis and then use that giant amount of money to make loans and do all kinds of other things. In steps technology. Suddenly, Chris, it is possible for you to just go online and say, hey, listen, I've got $10,000 here and I'd like it to earn 5%. Does anybody want to take my $10,000 and pay me 5%? And the algorithm will find someone who does. And all of a sudden, there's no longer a value in the bank aggregating all of that money together because the technology is substituting for the aggregation function of banks. Whoa, right? And if that sounds complicated, just come back to the post office analogy that I usually use. Back in the day before there was email, the only efficient way for me to send information to Chris across the country was I would take a letter and I'd go take it to the mailbox, and the mail collector would come and put it in one giant repository of all of the thousands of letters everywhere in the United States. And then they would say, okay, all letters going to New York, get on this Pony Express. All letters going to Los Angeles, get on that Pony Express. And they do that like once a day. That made sense before we had technology. But with email, we don't need the aggregation anymore. We don't. We can do it directly with each other and forget the aggregation. That's what it's ultimately all about. So the question, what are banks going to be good for in this era, is a really interesting one. I think the truth is they're going to be good for a lot, just not the aggregation of money necessarily, right? So what I think banks are great for is they're great for value add services. They're great for advice, for fiduciary stuff, for custody of physical assets. And eventually I expect that banks, much as the banks are all connected to the Fed payment system, they're all connected to the automated clearinghouse system and the SWIFT network, I expect that there is a future where banks will be directly connected to blockchains where, you know, they will see that as a payment network and they will become nodes on that network along with all kinds of other companies that are also nodes on that network. If that happens, banks may be able to mint their own stable coins, you know, in a way that would allow them to very readily design value add money transmission instruments, much as, you know, American Express innovated the world of traveler's checks 2 generations ago. So I think there's a huge role for banks, but it's a transformational role because the legacy role of being an aggregator of dollars may be completely disintermediated, which will then allow them to focus on the higher value add, higher profit services that they are best at anyway.
Do you have a sense, you know, you have an insider's view on so many things that are happening both in the banking space and in the blockchain space? I mean, do you have a sense as to, or do you anticipate that transformation being faster, slower? You know, certainly it would depend on a number of factors. What do you perceive as the major factors driving that transformational change and the degree to which the federal regulators are going to have to sort of grapple with it? What are you seeing in your brief but very active time over at the OCC?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Chris, on the brief but active thing, I am a big believer in the idea that it's not about the age, it's the mileage. So we got a lot of mileage on it. But look, the mistake I think that regulators often make is the belief that if something new enters the system, the new thing is risky relative to the old thing, which because it's old is somehow seen as not risky. We need to recognize that the status quo is risky in all kinds of ways. There's a lot of money laundering that goes on in the status quo banking system. There's also a lot of interest rate friction, a lot of chargeback risk, and all kinds of other things. So the first thing we need to get comfortable with is the idea that the status quo is not the risk-free environment. It has a set of risks and benefits, and change has a set of risks and benefits. So we should always be doing a net risk calculation, not like a sort of a standalone risk calculation, is the first thing I would say. And then, you know, where I sort of go is the notion that in the future, for banks to perform the services that people need, they're going to have to sort of compete with other alternatives. That's as true for regulators as it is for innovators. So if you look at the US relative to other countries right now, the EU has published a draft stablecoin framework. We haven't. We've made a lot of law enforcement statements about how we expect BSA and other things to be complied with, but we've said nothing about how, like, these are the conditions under which we think a stablecoin would be a good thing for the country. Instead, we're still talking about a government-built token system that might come online in 4 years. So we're years behind places like Europe in terms of articulating what we think could be a framework to let these things grow. In the meantime, corporate America is not waiting for that. So we've all read a lot about Facebook's Libra project with its various ups and downs. We've read less about other stablecoin projects like the Circle partnership for USDC or the Gemini coin or the Paxos coin. But if you look, Chris, over the last month or two, and you just look at the growth trajectory of these stablecoin projects, these have been doubling in market capitalization roughly every 60 days for the last 6 months. That's an incredible hockey stick asymptotic rate of growth, which tells us the market wants these things and the market will have these things. So we can try to push back as long as we can, kind of like the taxi cab commissions did with Uber, and we saw how that ended. Or we can embrace it and say, look, the good parts of this are very, very good. And we need to come out now and get in front of it by saying, we're okay with these projects as long as they meet these parameters, and only outside the parameters are we going to have problems. We need to be clearer about that if we want to be competitive as a country and if we want to avoid bad outcomes as markets move in the direction they're going to choose.
So let's, we don't have too much more time, so I want to just switch gears to a couple of things that I know people here in Washington, D.C. are thinking about. Many of the objectives of the work over the OCC has to do with increasing financial inclusion. And, when we chatted just last time, I think in June, we had discussed the Community Reinvestment Act. And since then, the Fed has issued, an advance notice of proposed rulemaking, sort of starting or kickstarting its own formal rulemaking. And there's some overlap between what the Fed is thinking about doing and obviously what you've proposed, but there are also some important differences. I mean, what would you highlight about the OCC's rule when people are trying to compare the two rules, and what do you see as the primary points of collaboration or overlap, and then where do you see the two approaches diverging the most?
Well, look, Chris, first of all, I appreciate you asking the question. I think the Senate is going to be voting on the Community Reinvestment Act rule today, actually. So it's a really good day to have this conversation. First of all, I'm a big believer in Ronald Reagan's dictum that it's amazing what you can get done if you don't care who gets the credit. So credit where credit's due. I think there's a lot of good stuff in the Fed's rule, and it is very possible that their ANPR will result in new ideas and intelligence that we have not considered that we could look at, next year to make our rule even better. So I think that's terrific, and I welcome what they're doing. At the same time, I'm also a big believer in not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think everybody gets, and I think the Fed's release shows that they agree, that the status quo is untenable. It's just untenable. And it's untenable because it ignores the fact that banks mostly do not provide their services through branches at the level that they used to 25 years ago when the CRA was last revised. And so we need to get away from branches as the touchstone of geographic assessment areas, and the Fed's rule does that. I think there's also a recognition in the Fed's rule, as in the OCC's rule, that there are groups that were excluded from CRA benefits generally that shouldn't be. For example, Indian country or farming communities, which really were never captured in the original concept of the CRA in 1977, when it was really focused on urban blight and redlining in big cities. So they do all of those things. I would tell you the main area of difference, I mean, there's a few others, but the main area of difference between our rule and the Fed's rule seems to be in the nature of discretion and how much subjectivity should there be in rating how banks perform. That's an issue where I'm happy to sort of put it out there for kind of a general plebiscite. I mean, who thinks it's better for bank examiners to subjectively decide whether a bank has done enough versus telling banks clearly what the rules are and what expectations we think they should meet? It would be sort of like, who wants an objective speed limit on the freeway where you're not speeding if you're not driving 75 versus a subjective rule where you can be pulled over anytime a policeman thinks you're driving maybe a little faster than he'd like? I think that question answers itself, but other than the discretion and the subjectivity, the rules are largely similar, which I think is great. And again, if we learn things from their ANPR, we're happy to make it better. We're not here for the credit, right? We're here to make credit and investment more available to the people who need it most.
Right. Well, we only have a minute, but I did want to speak as well to a question that many people are asking, particularly as the economy is sort of decelerating a bit. Not just the United States, but the world is still struggling to manage COVID-19. What's your sense as to how the banking system is holding up? I mean, how well are policymakers doing in balancing different kinds of risk and reward trade-offs. And then secondly, when you look at the health of the banking system, how does that impact your decision making when it comes to these new financial products and the evolution in banking with obviously the rise of stable coins and other kinds of digital assets?
Yeah, well, that's a lot. So I'm just going to tick off a few things because I know we've only got 60 seconds left. So first of all, I'm going to say the economy is not decelerating. The rate of acceleration is slowing, but we are still expanding. So let's be super clear. There's no deceleration out there. Second, in terms of the system seems to still be okay. I mean, we're coming to the end of the additional runway provided by PPP and other programs. But on the other hand, unemployment continues to fall and consumer spending, retail spending, and other things continue to rise. So I would say that we may thread the needle on this one. I certainly hope that we thread the needle, but that does depend on the economy reopening as fast as the PPP proceeds and other things are running off. Those lines need to intersect at the right moment for us to be okay. Banks are well provisioned, obviously, all of that stuff is good. Then you get to the question on, are we balancing costs and benefits right? Listen, does anybody think we're balancing costs and benefits? Does anybody think that there is any factor driving decision-making in this country right now other than COVID? I think not. And I think as a society, we do need to start having the conversation of, if somebody told us that our mortality risk in the society went from 0.0001% to 0.002%, which would be a doubling, but from one small number to another small number, and the cost of that, of shutting down in order to avoid that other small number, is mass dislocation and suicides and depressions and divorces and everything else, I think you would say we're only focused on one objective right now, and we're a big enough country and a good enough country. We can talk and chew gum at the same time. We can balance risks and benefits. We can understand this virus isn't going to go away if we lock down. That's not what viruses do. So what we need to start doing is understanding, how does an economy live with this thing and thrive and grow? Other countries are doing that. The news this morning is that China's productivity post-coronavirus is almost where it was pre-coronavirus, and that's in less than a year. Ours is nowhere close to that, although the trend lines are good, and it's nowhere close because we refuse to accept that there are other values in society in addition to coronavirus avoidance. So I think we need to balance risks and benefits of all of these things to come up with the right place. I think the trend lines are positive, but I would not say we're out of the woods yet.
Thank you so much, Brian. As always, the OCC has been with DC FinTech Week from the very, very start, years ago. And as always, we're really appreciative of the OCC and you and your support. We're going to be following this discussion and moving forward with a conversation on just how stable are stablecoins. And it'll be coming.
An October surprise awaits. That's what my guest today is alarming and letting us know. He is Gerald Celente, editor and publisher of the Trends Journal. Gerald, I'm really happy to see you. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great being on with you. It's one of my favorite hosts.
Thank you.
Of course,
you're one of my favorite people to interview, even though people are always saying, are you guys really arguing? And I tell them, no, we like to, what's the saying? Agree to disagree, or we get along, even though we might have differing points of view on certain topics, but I'm always open to learning from you, Gerald, and getting your point of view on things. So October surprise, that is the theme. A very scary theme with a jack-o'-lantern you have here on your October edition. They're killing us. Explain that. Who is they and how are they killing us, Gerald?
They are the politicians, and they're killing us in so many different ways. Look at the numbers coming out. And again, we only put the facts in the Trends Journal, and then we give our analysis of it. And the motto of the magazine is think for yourself. We don't tell anybody what to think. As my father used to say to me, rest in peace, and I'd repeat what everybody else was saying. He'd say, Papagallo, stop repeating what everybody else is saying and think for yourself. And when I say think for yourself, look around you. Could you imagine being a young kid going to kindergarten and you're wearing a mask and you're getting your temperature taken. And then being a young person where you got that, you know, craziness running through your bones and you want to go out and play and have a good time. No, you get back in your dormitory. No parties. No getting together. You're not going to a bar. You're not going to go out with friends. No dancing, no hugging. Hey, how about that woman that's the health minister over there in California? And no kissing. They're destroying our lives in so many different ways. They're robbing us of our joy, of liberty, life, beauty, and fun. And they've destroyed the global economy. This is unprecedented in world history. How can anybody imagine that you're locking down all these places, and you see the numbers coming out. Oh, Yelp comes out and says, oh, only 60% of the businesses aren't going to reopen. And then you look at the numbers. International air travel. Oh, it's only down 85%, but it'll come back. And this is insanity. And it's across the globe. And what are governments doing? You're locking down again. Cases are going up. Yeah, cases are going up, but the death levels are low. We don't care about that. We got the cases. Yeah, what's the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention? Oh, yeah, they say that between the ages of 1 and 50, your chances of recovery from the virus, the case, it's only 99.8% recovery rate. And again, we look at the people that are dying, and you and I talked about this when it first happened in Italy. The average age was 80 years old. But they locked down global economies. They've destroyed so many businesses. This is unprecedented. They're killing us in so many different ways. And, you know, freedom is just another word for something left to lose.
And I think you're expressing the frustrations of many, Gerald. On the flip side, you know, people would argue, well, no, they're not killing us. They're trying. And I know you're going to have a response to this, but they see it as they're trying to save us, hence the masks, hence the restrictions. They're saving lives.
And I would say to them, okay, go back and listen to that guy Fauci. What do they call Fauci in Italian? Was it Jaw? Yeah, the Jaw. Go back to March when he's saying, no, you don't have to wear masks. No. Go back to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Go back to World Health Organization. Go back to New England Journal of Medicine. Go back after one study, after another study, after another study, after another study, that the masks that people are wearing are totally ineffective.
Gerald, go ahead, continue.
And the other one is, what I keep trying to tell people is that, who are they? They are politicians. And these are the same they who gave me as a kid and my generation the protection of, in case an atom bomb goes off. In school, they had us hiding under our desks. So, okay, an atom bomb goes off, that desk saves your life. They're doing the same thing with these restrictions that they're giving us. They lack scientific data, and as the shows from other countries that didn't lock down, such as Belarus, Sweden, and others, lockdown, no lockdown, you see the numbers.
So what was your take or reaction to President Trump getting sick, his handling of it?
Again, did he die? He got sick. You ever been sick before? I remember being in bed for 2 weeks more than once when I got hit with something. And what they never tell you about, Daniela, not one peep. Build up your immune system. Get into good health. Watch what you eat. Work out. Hey, vitamin D, go outside. No, you're not going to go outside. Get back inside. Get back inside.
Gerald. Okay. Let's talk money. Let's talk the stock market, and let's talk how we can protect ourselves here, because you're concerned for the stock market. You've been saying for a long time that a crash is coming.
Yep.
a lot of your critics would say, hey, Gerald, you've been saying this for a long time. What's different this time around? Why is it worse now?
Well, I've been saying it a long time, and it hasn't happened because in graduate school, they never taught me, or Economics 101, about negative and zero interest rate policy, quantitative easing, and buying up corporate junk bonds. So as we all know, and the people that are listening all know, that the game is rigged. It's totally rigged in front of our eyes. Oh, you remember the repo market thing a year ago back in September? Oh yeah, what was it? What were they doing? Only 7 trillion they dumped in between September and January of 2019. Yeah. So what's different this time? The other big difference this time is I mentioned about how economy after economy, government after government, they've locked down. What's keeping it up? All the cheap money they're dumping into the system. The negative and zero interest rate policy. So why would anybody, to me, and I'm only speaking for myself, I don't give financial advice, why would they want this digital trash backed by nothing and printed on nothing when they just keep printing more and more of it? So let's go to the United States. Go back to January. Daniela, we're going to have $1 trillion trade deficit this year. Wow, $1 trillion date. And now what is it going to be? Only 3 trillion, because they pump more money in. And now they're coming up with a new deal. You're going to see another trillion or 2 or 3 dump back in. So this is devaluing all the currencies around the world, except one. And that is the Chinese, the yuan. Because what China's doing, and they're calling it a dual circulation, they know, the Chinese, that the global trade isn't going to be near what it used to be. So they're building up the internal economy, making it more self-sustaining. They got 1.4 billion people. We keep doing business with each other. 1.4 billion people will keep this thing going.
So why would the U.S. risk that, Gerald? Why would they risk losing their reserve currency status of the world?
Because they have no other choice. The economy, the people are broke. What's keeping retail sales up? You know the numbers. People were getting more money with that $600 a week than they were making at the jobs they had. They know that they have to artificially prop this up. It's every country's doing it. Every country is doing it. France, Italy, the whole European Union, one country after another, India. South Africa just went a couple of months or so ago, borrowed more money from the IMF. One after another. They're doing this artificially because when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And you're seeing violence going up. They want to keep it quiet, and money will do it.
So things to watch of a coming stock market collapse so people can be prepared. So, you know, a second wave of the virus, prolonged labor market weakness, inadequate stimulus, market dynamics, high valuations, heavy concentration, political uncertainty. Have I covered all the bases?
You got it. I mean, it's right in front of everybody's eyes. It's right. Why the hell are the equity markets going up when you have an economic crisis like this going on? Every major country is going to have a negative GDP this year. Oh, except one, China. You're looking at about 2.5. You know, as I said, the 20th century was the American century. The 21st century is going to be the Chinese century. And I don't say that in a very happy way. The business of China is business. The business of America has been war. China's doing everything they can now to boost up their economy. And so you nailed it when you put all those pieces together. How the hell is the stock market going up? How can cruise ships, cruise lines, airlines, oh, the stocks went up today because they're looking at a new vaccine that, what am I, 6 years old? Who are you kidding here with this crap?
We've spoken about how you protect yourself in the past. I know you are a believer in gold. Have you changed your positioning at all? Have you been doing anything different the past 6 months that we haven't spoken?
No, gold and silver. And in the Trends Journal, we said in June that silver prices were going to spike a higher percentage than gold.
Are you still buying today, or are you all stocked up? You feel good?
I started buying gold in 1978.
All right, so you're good. Will it change dependent on who wins the election, Gerald?
No, not a bit. Not as I see it. Not as I see it. It's out of their control. It's out of their control. Hey, you remember a place, I think I met you down there once, called New York City?
It's my home today. Yes, I know it well.
Yeah, and you know how dead it is. And in a million years, you could have never imagined it. I'm a Bronx guy.
I know.
I used to say Bronx boy, but
you are a proud, you know, I'm an adopted New Yorker. You are the real deal. So I can't imagine how it must hurt you to see it. Does New York City ever recover? Honestly, Gerald, does New York City?
It'll recover.
New York strong, does it recover?
It'll recover, but it's going to be years. You know, we wrote when this started happening, when the lockdowns happened, in early March, we wrote that people will be leaving densely populated cities over fear of the virus and because of violence and crime and declining economy. And it's happened, exactly like we said. And do you know, Bloomberg did a study of 181 cities in America. Do you know where the values of the homes went up the most? Kingston, New York, where I am. Do you think it makes me happy? I own these buildings. It doesn't make me happy. Yeah. It doesn't, that the prices went way up. The streets are dead. There's no life anymore. And it's everywhere. This is unprecedented. It's unprecedented. Empty streets. Empty streets. So, commercial real estate, major apartments, they're going to keep going down. The crisis is beyond. What was the one that just closed down? The cinema just closed down. The Regal just closed down all their. Yeah. In Disney, how many people they lay out? Like 28,000. Oh yeah, one. I show only 9,000. One after another.
And Century 21, a shopping mecca in New York City, shutting down.
Yeah.
My heart.
I know. This is unprecedented. That's what I'm trying to say. It's unprecedented. And so the people, go back, Daniela, to when this began.
Yeah.
We have the facts there, the words coming out of the mouths of the politicians and the media. They called it a war, a COVID war, when it began. These are the same politicians that start a war and they don't have any exit strategy. They have no exit strategy for this. You go back and you go to the beginning, nobody talked about what the implications would be. Nobody. We're locking you down, we're locking you down.
I want to know, and I know you don't know the answer to this, but we can philosophize of how does this end? Do we just go, does the whole system just erode, blow up, and we have to restart from scratch? I mean, how does this play out? How does it end, Gerald? Where do we go from here?
If it stays locked down, it's going to be hell on earth. Look at the businesses going out of business. I mean, you put your whole life into your business, a bar, a retail shop, whatever it might, a florist, and it's gone. It's gone. So the bigs are going to get bigger. Oh, the numbers just came out again today. The billionaires got richer. Right. The billionaires got richer. The bigs got bigger. That's what's going to happen. We all become plantation workers on the global plantation of Slavelandia.
Gerald, when was the last time you were optimistic?
I was optimistic about the changes of society as I started seeing people enjoying life more. How can I possibly be optimistic when I see people wearing masks all the time? Oh, and by the way, one of the covers of our Trends Journal back in February was Tank Man 2.0 and the Tiananmen Square Tank Man with the tank coming out of it. And we did 2.0 with the COVID tank. How can I be optimistic when Americans have taken and the line was, the Chinese way you must obey. Everybody's wearing masks. Why did they wear them in China? because of the pollution. 1.7 million people a year die from the pollution. And notice the masks, that even if it's President Xi or anybody, it's those blue masks, right? Not in America. Now we're going to have fashionable masks. Now we're masked up. They have taken it to heart. Again, I'm not making this up. No singing. No singing. You're going to spread that germ. I'm not making it up. No hugging, no kissing, one after another. How come I be optimistic? The only way I have to tell you that I see this changing, and I think you'll be able to understand this, there was a thing called the Black Plague. And after the Black Plague, what followed it? The Renaissance. Ale Romana al Antica, in the manner of the Romans and the ancients, to describe the quality and beauty of the past. And that to me is what has to happen.
I wish I could be transported back in time. I would go back and pick the Renaissance as the period.
Exactly.
I want to live in.
And what was the leading element? Art.
Creation,
beauty.
art, geniusness. So
that's the freedom, and that's gone.
Maybe that's
I'm your governor. I'll tell you what to do.
Gerald, you know,
art is the way of finding the true meaning of the human spirit.
You know the Italian saying, it makes me think of this listening to you. Non ci resta che piangere. All that's left to do is cry.
No.
Keep smiling.
Fight for freedom, and that's what I'm doing. I'm doing it. I put my money where my heart is. I had a big rally up here on the 4th of July in the Crown Garden. I had over 250 people against the orders of the governor for freedom for the 4th of July. So I fight for freedom.
I'm not even going to ask you about Cuomo. We won't even go there. Gerald Celente, keep that passion alive.
Yeah, passione, it keeps us alive.
And I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for joining me on my brand new show here at Stansberry Research.
Oh, and thanks so much for having me on. I love being on with you.
Awesome. Amazing. And thank you for watching. You can get your latest edition from Trends Journal, October Surprise. Read everything that Gerald has to say. In the meantime, you can follow us on all our social media channels. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. We are there. For Stansberry Research, I'm Daniela Cambone. Thank you for watching.
Debate of the 2020 election. For the first time since October 2016, President Trump will share the stage with a political opponent, Democratic presidential nominee and former Vice President Joe Biden. Here's a look at the stakes for tonight. About 3/4 of likely viewers, people who say they'll watch, are tuning in to see how their candidate does. Just 6% say they're watching because they're still deciding whom to vote for. 6% may not sound like a lot, but it can take less than that to flip a state. 13 states, plus Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, saw a margin smaller than 6% in the 2016 election. Together, they're worth 162 electoral votes, more than half the 270 needed to win the presidency. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Nicole Killian join me now. Caitlin is CBSN's political reporter. She is in Cleveland tonight. And Nicole is a CBS News correspondent covering all things out of Washington. Welcome to you both. All right, Caitlin, let me start with you. The number of persuadable voters may be relatively small, but how important are undecided voters at this moment in the campaign?
Right, that number of undecided voters is very small. We have fresh new polling out from CBS News that shows a vast majority of people that are going to be watching this debate tonight, likely voters. 73% say that they've already chosen a candidate and they're tuning in to see how that candidate does. About 41% are tuning in just for the entertainment value alone. About 8% are tuning in because they have nothing else to watch. So maybe they have exhausted all of the options on Netflix. And here's the key number, 6%. 6% of likely voters in our poll tonight say they are tuning in to figure out who they are going to vote for. So that's a very small margin, a very small number. We've been talking all day about, are there any of these persuadable voters left in an election that is increasingly becoming all about turning out your base? who are these voters that are going to be tuning in tonight? Just 6% of them looking to see how Biden and Trump do against each other. We know, as we've been talking about also, that Democratic Party voters have been waiting for tonight this entire campaign, going all the way back to Iowa in 2019 when I was out there covering one of the first presidential events by Elizabeth Warren, who announced her candidacy. Voters even then were saying that the way that they were going to measure up these candidates running for the Democratic nomination was imagining them on a debate stage with Donald Trump. So tonight we'll see what their expectations are and if they paid off.
Yeah, I remember you telling us about that all those months ago. Well, Nicole, of course, one big difference about this election cycle is that voting is already underway. Close to 1.3 million people have already voted. In the battleground state of Wisconsin, they're already at a 10th of 2016 turnout. So how does that change the dynamic of the race and the debates?
Well, I think it does and it doesn't. I mean, that is a lot of people, but there's still a lot of people who haven't voted. And so whether someone is voting absentee, voting by mail, voting early in person, which we've seen that in a number of states, or just waiting until Election Day to cast their vote, voters make up their minds when they make up their minds. And while many have, there are still some out there that haven't. I've been traveling across a couple of states recently where I have encountered people who, few at least, who are still undecided. So to Caitlin's point, even if it is a relatively small number by our polling standards, certainly this presents an opportunity for voters to put these two candidates side by side and see how they match up against each other. And also, again, as Caitlin mentioned, certainly with the latest polling also showing that people just want to see how these candidates do. And I was struck by that number that some are just tuning in for the entertainment value of it all. But, the bottom line is certainly it will be a factor for some voters as far as their decision. To others, it may reinforce the decision they've already made.
Yeah. Well, we know that tonight's debate topics are broken up into 6 different segments as chosen by the moderator, each for about 15 minutes. Caitlin, in which topics do you see the candidates gaining an advantage?
Well, I think the focus on 2 topics that are top of mind for voters heading into this November election, the coronavirus pandemic and the economy. On the coronavirus pandemic, Joe Biden has shown in battleground states and nationally that he leads on that measure, that Americans by and large disapprove of the president's handling of coronavirus and are supporting Biden on that measure. But when it comes to the economy, that's been the silver lining for Donald Trump. He's been leading on the measure of the economy, trying to make that argument that the economy was good before the pandemic happened. So this is going to be an instance where you'll see the president on offense going after Joe Biden probably on the economy and raising questions about what Joe Biden would do and what he would have done differently on that measure. And then on coronavirus, this is where the Biden campaign really wants to focus tonight, making this race a referendum on the president's handling of the pandemic and also saying what he would have done differently if he were in charge. So those are 2 measures that are top of mind for voters and 2 issues that we'll see discussed at length in this debate.
Well, Nicole, we know the president and Joe Biden have each been preparing in different ways for this debate, and we've seen them both on the debate stage before. President Trump last in 2016, and Joe Biden as recently as March. How might they approach this debate?
Well, I think in one of 2 ways, or a combination of both. I think if they stick to the script, I think you will hear, for instance, the president make the argument of, I've been doing more in 47 months than Joe Biden has in 47 years. That's been the argument he's been making most recently on the campaign trail. And so I think you will hear that thread through any number of topics, whether it is the pandemic, the economy, race, law and order, even with his Supreme Court nominee. So that's one possibility. And of course, Biden, the mantra he's been sounding as of late has been the Scranton versus Park Avenue approach. And so with the story that broke a couple of days ago on the president's taxes, this allows him to hammer that message home as well, that he's the one looking out for the little guy, you know, the average worker out there, while the president has, you know, kind of lived the high life his whole life. And so I think, again, you will hear the former vice president make that argument across all the topics tonight. If they go off script, all bets are off. I mean, I think that's really certainly one thing I'll be watching for, but I think what a lot of people will be watching for, especially those who said they're looking for the entertainment value here, you know, how will the gloves come off? You know, will these guys go after each other? If you have followed the president and watched his campaign rallies, he can go in on Joe Biden. Joe Biden equally can hit back. And we even heard the vice president just tonight at a debate watch party saying that the president is going to bring the fight to Joe Biden tonight. So to the extent that this does become a knockout, drag-out fight, that is certainly something that I think many will be watching for as well. So on script, off script, we'll just have to see, or a combination of both, like I said.
Right, something like that. All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Nicole Killian, great to have you both. Thank you. As we mentioned, the president has not been on a debate stage since 2016. Back then, Philippe Reines played the role of then-Republican nominee Donald Trump for Hillary Clinton's debate prep. Here's some of what they had to prepare for.
A good job in the 1990s. I think a lot about what worked and how we can make it work again.
Well, he approved
3 million
NAFTA.
new jobs, a balanced budget,
which is the single worst trade deal ever approved in this country.
Incomes went up for everybody. Just join the debate by saying more crazy things. Now, let me say
there's nothing crazy about not letting our companies bring their money back into their country.
This is Secretary Clinton's 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, well, let's start the clock again, Lester. Starting when I was a senator from New York. But that's not the point here.
Why didn't you do it? Why didn't you do it?
Because I was a senator with a Republican president.
Oh, really?
I will be the
president. You
president.
could have done it. If you were an effective, senator, you could have done it. If you were an effective senator, you could have done it. But you were not an effective.
Please allow her to respond. She didn't interrupt you.
That's part of my commitment to raise taxes on the wealthy. My Social Security payroll contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund.
And former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and Senior Advisor to Hillary Clinton, Philippe Reines, joins me now. Philippe, welcome. So you said that the key to beating President Trump in a debate is to, quote, get out of his way. What did you mean by that?
First, I want to thank you for that just lovely walk down memory lane.
How'd you feel about that, Philippe?
Parts of it I want to laugh, parts of it I want to cry. I'll probably do it after we hang up. What I mean by that is, look, there is one Donald Trump. People argue which Donald Trump are we going to see. There's one. You see him, you cover the White House, you see what's happening every single day. We see it 3 to 5 times a week for the last 6 months. That guy is showing up tonight. There's no other guy. So that guy is not doing well. That guy, he's got his 40%, but the rest of America is not so keen on the bluster, on the bombast, on the line. Now, it makes good TV, and if Donald Trump's strategy is to really take advantage of the biggest audience he's going to have this campaign, then yeah, he can enjoy himself, and maybe even some people will say he won the debate, but he's losing the race. And if his goal were to come into this debate and try to do some good for himself, he would take a different approach. But as a human being, he's not capable of doing it. So everyone's focused on how is Joe Biden going to react? What is Joe Biden going to say? Is he going to fact check him? Is he going to keep his cool? Is he going to lose his cool? The truth of the matter is, if I were Joe Biden, and I would say, hi, Chris Wallace, the moderator, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you to Case University for hosting us. And with that, I yield my 45 minutes to Donald Trump, because the guy never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And while 4 years ago it was hard to watch about those clips, was that you do see how within the interrupting and the histrionics, he's delivering message, whether it was job creation or trade, and he was getting in his knocks on her. Now he doesn't do that. Now when he opens his mouth, it's a list of grievances about how slippery ramps are and about how perfect his transcripts are and angry Democrats. And it's one thing if he stands in the Rose Garden and he has all the time in the world to go off for 50 minutes and throw in some stuff about Joe Biden, he's got 2 or 3 minutes at a shot tonight. If he wants to send, each of those men have to decide, do I want to spend 90 minutes quarreling with the other guy, or do I want to spend 90 minutes talking to the audience? It's clear what choice Trump is going to make. It's clear that Joe Biden knows the more he talks to the audience, the better he is. That doesn't mean he's going to stand there and take whatever comes at him. And by the way, if he just stood there and took it, a lot of people would say, including me, I don't want to see someone who can't defend themselves, who can't be strong in the face of being bullied. So Joe Biden has a hard job, but Donald Trump has a bigger task. And I'm pretty confident that he's going to blow it. And even the last thing I'll say is, in the 1% chance that he took this mythical debate drug himself and he were to give a good performance and say, everyone should wear masks and we're going to test more, it'll stop tomorrow. He'll undo anything he does. So that guy's going to show up and that guy's losing. And that guy is counting on Joe Biden to, I don't know, have some kind of health event that disqualifies himself. I mean, it's a pretty passive plan.
You know, Philippe, I want to ask you a question having to do with gender, because you raised this notion of Donald Trump interrupting Secretary Clinton during the debate. Let's go ahead and, at the risk of alienating you, Philippe, we're going to play for some of our viewers here who may have missed our montage off the top, just a little bit of what we saw in 2016. Let's listen.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
You know, Philippe, I'm not even sure what the question is. I think I start with this idea. Do you think there is a difference in the expectation of a male candidate versus a female candidate when it comes to engaging in these kinds of verbal confrontations in a place like a general election debate?
There's absolutely no doubt. I mean, no one tonight is going to look at Joe Biden and say, oh, he interrupted Donald Trump, how, testy of him or how touchy of him. Hillary Clinton was the first major party nominee, and without going down this path too much, we look at these debates and we look at moments like these and we try to envision a president. We only had 44 men who have been president, so it's hard, it's impossible to imagine a woman. Now, Hillary herself has written in her book, in that moment later on where he's stalking her, that I want to turn around and say, back off, creep. You know what? The idea that everyone would applaud and think that's so great, it would have been good TV. And in hindsight, I wish she had done it. But we'd also be talking about, does she have the temperament? Did she lose her cool? Did she, is she two words that I won't say on, family-friendly mediums? And Joe Biden doesn't have to worry about that. Does that give Joe Biden an
advantage? Sorry, Philippe, I don't mean to interrupt, but does that mean Joe Biden has an advantage that Hillary Clinton didn't?
It is. I mean, that one clip, he said she is such a nasty woman. We're all sitting here like, oh yeah, I remember that moment. That's just another day in our life. He wouldn't have said that. He's not going to say, he might say to Chris Wallace, that's such a nasty question, or that is such a nasty person. And maybe he says to Joe Biden, you're so nasty, but it's different. When he said, what he won't say, which he said to Hillary, she doesn't have that presidential look. And I don't think he was talking about her tie or lack of. He was saying she's a woman, that she's shorter, she can't bench press as much. I mean, I don't even know what he's saying, but you know it when you hear it. And no, that's not something that Joe Biden has to deal with. And unfortunately, that's probably going to redound to his benefit. I mean, Hillary I love her to death, and I've worked for her and known her since 2002, but she has an incredibly annoying habit of being right about 4 or 5 years too early.
Well, let me ask you this. If you're Joe Biden, do you see these debates more as an opportunity or a potential liability, given what we've seen so far with respect to the trajectory of this contest?
No, I would be excited if first of all, as a human, these people get nervous too. And, he spent some time figuring out what kind of tie he should wear. But if I were Joe Biden, he knows he's ready. It might get ugly. He'll have good moments, he'll have bad moments, but he knows that this is the best opportunity to talk to audiences that might not ever see. I mean, this is just a lot of people. You're going to have people tonight that are tuning in to Fox to watch Tucker who are going to say, oh, I'm bumping into a debate. And they're going to see them for 90 minutes, and they're going to see them without a filter. Now, they might be yelling and talking over each other, but it's not until later at night that the likes of Sean Hannity gets their hands on these clips and starts to say other things. And that does not benefit Donald Trump. Donald Trump needs that filter. He needs the artificial, the guy, Britt Hume on Fox a little while ago said that he's convinced that Joe Biden is senile. You know what the problem is? Joe Biden's not senile, and we're all about to see that he's not senile. And yes, these are opportunities. And it's in very simple terms, the debate is a huge moment, but it's just another moment. His convention speech was a moment. His being yesterday at a rally is a moment. His giving a speech next week is a moment. The campaign is a totality of moments. And Joe Biden's have been consistent. What Joe Biden says tonight is what he's going to say tomorrow is what he said last month. And that seems to be working with enough people to put him in office, hopefully. Donald Trump, what he says tonight, some of it will be the same, but he's so proud of the fact that he's got new lines of attack on Joe Biden. I'm sorry, if it's 35 days left and you're still trying to figure out what to say, then you aren't just blowing a big moment. You've been blowing every moment until now.
All right. Well, we are just minutes away. Philippe Reines. Philippe, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
Still to come, we'll talk President Trump's strategy for tonight with RNC Senior Advisor for Data, Katie Walsh-Shields. Stay with us. You're streaming Red and Blue.
Or maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So if he's paid zero, that means zero for troops, zero for vets, zero for schools or health. And I think probably he's not all that enthusiastic about having the rest of our country see what the real reasons are.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. Boom. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
COVID has taken the lives of tens of thousands of Americans. Rural areas like this here on Navajo Nation are especially hit hard.
15 to 30% of our Navajo citizens don't have running water.
In any indigenous reservation, there is a shortage of physicians.
Native Americans are amongst the most vulnerable and hardest hit by COVID.
Yeah, the more we lose our elders to COVID-19, the more we lose our language and our way of life.
We need to bring awareness to the attention of Washington, D.C. and United States citizens that there is a need to focus on the first citizens of this country.
In 60 years, we went from about 100,000 factory workers to probably about 7,000.
Off in the distance, you can see some factories that are still humming, but most of them are just kind of abandoned.
The restaurant industry right now is one of the largest and fastest growing industries in America. And yet it continues to be the absolute lowest paying employer in the United States.
Barely anybody's making enough to live.
You were donating plasma to get by.
It's literally a slave wage.
I don't remember growing up like this. My mom didn't have to go to food banks.
It's pretty sad.
even really young kids are feeling what's going on right now. How should parents be talking to them about this whole question of racial justice?
How do we embrace this moment and turn it into real change?
What we really must focus on is moving from protesting to policy.
Join Gail, Anthony, and Tony on CBS This Morning.
CBSN Los Angeles. Get local news, breaking news, anytime, anywhere.
It's easy to find us, and it's free.
Download the CBS News app on your favorite devices. CBSN Los Angeles, streaming 24/7.
You can watch CBSN 24/7.
We've got an amazing story to share with you.
I understand you have some breaking news.
How does it all play out?
It's quite an adventure here at CBSN.
It's been a day.
We're just minutes away from the start of the first debate between President Trump and Joe Biden. Mr. Trump is the first incumbent in 28 years to enter the first debate, trailing in national polls. Katie Walsh-Shields joins me now. She is a senior advisor for data at the Republican National Committee and former chief of staff at the RNC. Welcome to you, Katie. Thanks for joining us. So both President Trump and Joe Biden are trying to win over this small sliver of undecided voters. What role does a debate play in attracting those voters?
Well, thanks for having me. I think the debate plays an important role in that it'll be the first time that voters will see the president and former Vice President Biden on the same stage as a contrast. And I think that's a big deal. We really haven't seen former Vice President Biden campaign very much. We haven't seen him on the trail. When we have, he's had a certain level of gaffes. And so I think this will be the first time that the voters can see them side by side. I think that that'll be a big opportunity for, as you mentioned, a small sliver of voters, but still, I think it'll make a difference.
All right, when I let our audience know, on the left of our screen there, we are looking at live pictures, or we were, of Case Western Reserve University, of course, where that debate is set to get underway minutes from now. So we know the basic topics for tonight. Katie, which ones do you think the president could use to his advantage the most out of the list?
Well, I think the economy is clearly the president's strong suit. I think he'll talk a lot about the 10.6 million new jobs he's created in the last 4 months since we've kind of reopened post-shutdown with coronavirus. And I think that'll be something he'll come back to over and over again. There are just so many things that are tied to getting people back to work, including opening schools, getting kids back in school. A lot of people get their health care from their work, from their jobs. And so you'll see the president come back over and over again, I believe, to how important it is to keep the economy open, how vital it is to make sure that we're getting people back to work, and contrasting that with Joe Biden, who has directly said he would be for another shutdown if we had an outbreak.
Yeah, I do want to ask you more about the pandemic because the president has made a number of contradictory statements about the coronavirus pandemic. We know from polling that many people are skeptical about a vaccine. The president insists that one will be ready within weeks. Medical experts, though, who work for him say that's not true. And I wonder what you think the president's approach should be in talking about this, given the fact that we know there are Americans who look at this notion of when a vaccine comes out, they feel as though they won't necessarily be in line first to get it because there has been a lot of political kind of conversation surrounding the push for this vaccine.
I think the Democrats have actually made an even bigger political statement on this. You've seen Senator Harris come out and say she actually wouldn't take the vaccine even if it came out. And I think that confuses the American public, and we'll continue to have this conversation between the president, who I think has been incredibly helpful in terms of his Operation Warp Speed and taking regulation out of the drug approval process to try and get a drug to market faster. I think once we have a vaccine, it'll come in record time. And I think you will see the Democrats, Vice President Biden and Senator Harris, constantly skeptical of it. And I think the American public will see through that, because the American public says, look, a vaccine should not be political. We need to protect our seniors. We need to get people back to work. We need to protect our vulnerable individuals as it relates to the COVID virus. And so I think they will kind of see through that ploy, but I think the president should be commended for his work on Operation Warp Speed.
All right, we just saw moments ago the various family members from both candidates entering the debate hall. There you see the moderator, Fox News' Chris Wallace, addressing the audience now, but certainly in a sign of these COVID-19 times, you saw those family members were all wearing masks and their chairs appeared to be socially distant. I do also want to ask you, Katie, about health care. When are we going to see specifics on the president's health care plan? And what are your thoughts about it getting past a Democratic-controlled Congress?
I don't think we've seen many things get through in the last 4 years, or excuse me, the last 2 years with the Democrat-controlled House. So I'm not terribly optimistic that anything would get passed with the Democrat-controlled House. But I do think you'll see the president continue to talk about covering pre-existing conditions, about lowering prescription drug prices. He's been really tough on the pharmaceutical companies, which is not historically a position that Republicans have taken. And so I think it is really something that he will continue to talk to seniors about. It's a main issue to seniors over and over again when you look at polling, is prescription drug prices. And so I think you'll see the president continue to talk about the elements of a health care plan that he thinks are important, but I don't think there's much chance that anything gets through the Democrat-controlled House.
So we shouldn't expect a sort of comprehensive plan, more piecemeal kind of elements, as you say, of what he would like to see in healthcare.
Well, I'm sure the White House may put out a policy paper that kind of outlines what he would like to see in a bill. But I think, the president will, I think, understand that getting something through a Democrat-controlled House is very unlikely. And so he'll continue to put his benchmarks out and say, these are the things that I would want in a healthcare bill. If we're going to talk about what is important with healthcare with the American public, this is what I want to see. And I think he'll maybe put out position papers. I think you'll see the president communicate that directly, as he often does with American people, but I don't think you'll see any movement on it. And so I think you'll continue to see Democrats and Republicans kind of going back and forth on what they think is important, but I don't know that we'll see an actual bill to speak of.
All right, Katie Walsh-Shields. Katie, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And the first debate between President Trump and Joe Biden is about to get started. Let's go to our CBS News Primetime Special.
We'll win and we'll do it together.
Former Vice President Joe Biden.
This is the most important election in the history of our country.
President Donald Trump.
Maybe he's going to be great at the debate. He's been doing it for 47 years.
The first presidential debate.
Have you begun to prepare for debates against President Trump?
I can hardly wait.
Good evening. I'm Nora O'Donnell with Gail King and John Dickerson in the nation's capital, and we are just moments away from the first presidential debate between President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. After months of lobbying long-distance attacks, aides for both candidates say tonight the gloves and the masks will come off. The two men arrived at the debate hall at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland a short time ago. They are not expected to shake hands because of the coronavirus pandemic.
And let's not forget, as we come on the air tonight, this virus has killed more than 205,000 Americans. This pandemic has led the U.S. into its worst economic contraction since the Great Depression. More than 26 million Americans are claiming unemployment benefits, and two late developments have thrown a lit match into an already volatile race. The Republicans' effort to quickly replace the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg with conservative Judge Amy Coney Barrett, and the latest revelations about President Trump's taxes.
So the stage is set for this first showdown. There will be no opening statements. Chris Wallace of Fox News will be asking the questions. He was chosen by the Presidential Debate Commission, and he's identified 6 main topics: the Trump and Biden records, the Supreme Court, COVID-19, the economy, race and violence in cities, and the integrity of the election.
It is going to be quite a night ahead. Let's bring in CBS's Ben Tracy at the White House. And Ben, what are you hearing from the Trump campaign?
Well, Nora, we're hearing that President Trump is ready to joust and that he feels that Joe Biden's family and his cognitive abilities are fair game in this debate. Now, the president is expecting the first question out of the gate will be about his taxes, these revelations that he basically did not pay any federal income tax for years. We're also told by the campaign as they're trying to play down the president's preparation for this debate that he actually has been practicing, and they say he's ready for any question that may come his way.
Ben Tracy, let's turn now to CBS's Ed O'Keefe. He is in the debate hall where the anticipation is building. Ed?
Nora, good evening. Once they get rocking and rolling here in Cleveland tonight, expect Biden to focus on two key things: the president's taxes and his handling of the coronavirus pandemic and the economic downturn. His aides believe if he keeps focused on those two issues, he can maintain his lead in battleground states. One thing we shouldn't expect Biden to do tonight is serve as a real-time fact checker. He'd suggested earlier this month that's what he wanted to do. His aides now say he'll instead try speaking directly to the American people. Here in the room tonight, we count about 107 invited guests. That's down from the usual 900 who observe these debates in person. Nora?
Ed O'Keefe, thank you. And John, does Trump know that he has to change the trajectory of this race as it stands now?
Absolutely. You can hear Ben Tracy say it, which is he's going to be going at all over the place because he wants to shake things up. That's always been his way.
The debate is about to begin. Here now, the moderator, Chris Wallace.
Good evening from the Health Education campus of Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Clinic. I'm Chris Wallace of Fox News, and I welcome you to the first of the 2020 presidential debates between President Donald J. Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. The commission has designed the format, 6 roughly 15-minute segments with 2-minute answers from each candidate to the first question, then open discussion for the rest of each segment. Both campaigns have agreed to these rules. For the record, I decided the topics and the questions in each topic. I can assure you, none of the questions has been shared with the commission or the two candidates. This debate is being conducted under health and safety protocols designed by the Cleveland Clinic, which is serving as the health security advisor to the commission for all 4 debates. As a precaution, both campaigns have agreed the candidates will not shake hands at the beginning of tonight's debate. The audience here in the hall has promised to remain silent. No cheers, no boos or other interruptions, so we, and more importantly you, can focus on what the candidates have to say. No noise except right now, as we welcome the Republican nominee, President Trump, and the Democratic nominee, Vice President Biden.
How you doing, man? How are you? I'm well.
Gentlemen, a lot of people have been waiting for this night, so let's get going. Our first subject is the Supreme Court. President Trump, you nominated Amy Coney Barrett over the weekend to succeed the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court. You say the Constitution is clear about your obligation and the Senate's to consider a nominee to the court. Vice President Biden, you say that this is an effort by the president and Republicans to jam through an appointment and what you call an abuse of power. My first question to both of you tonight: why are you right in the argument you make and your opponent wrong? And where do you think a Justice Barrett would take the court? President Trump, in this first segment, you go first. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chris. I will tell you very simply, we won the election. Elections have consequences. We have the Senate, we have the White House, and we have a phenomenal nominee, respected by all, top academic, good in every way, In fact, some of her biggest endorsers are very liberal people from Notre Dame and other places. So I think she's going to be fantastic. We have plenty of time. Even if we did it after the election itself. I have a lot of time after the election, as you know. So I think that she will be outstanding. She's going to be as good as anybody that has served on that court. We really feel that. We have a professor at Notre Dame, highly respected by all, said she's the single greatest student he's ever had. He's been a professor for a long time at a great school. And we won the election, and therefore we have the right to choose her. And very few people knowingly would say otherwise. And by the way, the Democrats, they wouldn't even think about not doing it. If they had, the only difference is they'd try and do it faster. There's no way they would give it up. They had Merrick Garland, but the problem is they didn't have the election, so they were stopped. And probably that would happen in reverse also. Definitely would happen in reverse. So we won the election, and we have the right to do it, Chris.
President Trump, thank you. Same question to you, Vice President Biden. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, thank you for doing this, and looking forward to this, Mr. President.
Thank you, Joe.
The American people have a right to have a say in who the Supreme Court nominee is, and that say occurs when they vote for a United States senators and when they vote for the President of the United States. They're not going to get that chance now because we're in the middle of an election already. The election has already started. Tens of thousands of people have already voted. And so the thing that should happen is we should wait. We should wait and see what the outcome of this election is, because that's the only way the American people get to express their view is by who they elect as president and who they elect as vice president. Now, what's at stake here is the president's made it clear he wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. He's been running on that, he ran on that, and he's been governing on that. He's in the Supreme Court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which will strip 20 million people from having insurance, health insurance now, if it goes into court, and the justice, and I have nothing. I'm not opposed to the justice. She seems like a very fine person, but she's written before she went on the bench, which is her right, that she thinks that the Affordable Care Act is not constitutional. The other thing that's on the court, and if it's struck down, what happens? Women's rights are fundamentally changed. Once again, a woman could be pay more money because she has a pre-existing condition of pregnancy. They were able to charge a woman more for the same exact procedure a man gets. And that ended when we, in fact, passed the Affordable Care Act. And there's 100 million people who have pre-existing conditions, and they'll be taken away as well. Those pre-existing conditions, the insurance companies are going to love this. And so it's just not appropriate to do this before this election. If he wins the election and the Senate is Democrat or Republican, then he goes forward. If not, we should wait until February.
All right. There aren't 100 million people with pre-existing conditions. As far as the say is concerned, the people already had their say. Okay, Justice Ginsburg said very powerfully, very strongly, at some point, 10 years ago or so, she said a president and the Senate is elected for a period of time, but a president's elected for 4 years. We're not elected for 3 years. I'm not elected for 3 years. So we have the Senate, we have a president.
He's elected to the next
during
election.
that period of time, we have an opening. I'm not elected for 3 years. I'm elected for 4 years. And the 100 million people, Joe, the 100 million people is totally wrong. I don't know where you got that number. The bigger problem that you have is that you're going to extinguish 180 million people with their private health care that they're very happy with.
That's simply not true.
Well, you're certainly going to socialist. You're going to socialist medicine.
We're now into, gentlemen, we're now into open discussion.
Open discussion.
Open discussion. Yes, I agree. Go ahead, Vice President.
Number one, he knows that what I proposed. What I proposed is that we expand Obamacare and we increase it. We do not wipe any, and one of the big debates we had with 23 of my colleagues trying to win the nomination that I won, were saying that Biden wanted to allow people to have private insurance still. They can, they do, they will under my proposal.
It's not what you've said, but and it's not what your party has said.
That is simply
your party
a lie.
Doesn't say it. Your party wants to go socialist medicine.
My party is
and
me.
Socialist
right
healthcare.
now, I am
and
the
they're going to dominate
party.
you, Joe. You know that.
I am the Democratic Party right now. The platform of the Democratic Party is what I, in fact, approved of. What I approved of. Now, here's the deal. The deal is that it's going to wipe out pre-existing conditions. And by the way, the 200,000 people that have died on his watch, how many of those have survived? Well, there's 7 million people that contracted COVID. What does it mean for them going forward if you strike down the Affordable Care Act?
Joe, you've had 308,000 military people dying because you couldn't provide them proper health care in the military. So don't tell me about this.
I'm happy to talk about this.
And if you were here,
Look,
it wouldn't be 200, it would be 2 million people because you were very late on the draw. You didn't want me to ban China, which was heavily infected. You didn't want me to ban
all right, gentlemen,
which was heavily infected. You would have been much later, Joe.
Mr. President,
much later.
Mr. President.
You're talking about 2 million people.
Mr. President, as the moderator, we are going to talk about COVID in the next segment, but go ahead.
Let me finish. The point is that the president also is opposed to Roe v. Wade. That's on the ballot as well in the court. And so that's also at stake right now. And so the election is already begun.
You don't know it's on the ballot. Why is it on the ballot?
Because
why is it on the ballot? It's not on the ballot.
It's on the ballot in the court.
I don't think so.
In the court. Well,
there's nothing happening there.
Donald, would you just
don't know her view on Roe v. Wade.
I don't know
her view.
Well, all right. Let's talk. We got a lot to unpack here, gentlemen. We got a lot of time. So on health care, and then we'll come back to Roe v. Wade.
All right.
Mr. President, the Supreme Court will hear a case a week after the election in which the Trump administration, along with 18 state attorneys general, are seeking to overturn Obamacare, to end Obamacare. You have spent the last...
Because they want to give good health care.
If I may ask my question, sir.
Good health care.
Over the last 4 years, you have promised to repeal and replace Obamacare, but you have never in these 4 years come up with a plan, a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare.
Of course I have.
Well,
I got rid of the individual mandate.
I'm going to give you an opportunity.
I got rid of the individual mandate, which was a big chunk of Obamacare. That is absolutely a big thing. That was the worst part of Obamacare.
Sir,
Chris, that was the worst part of Obamacare.
Let me ask my question.
Well, I'll ask Joe. The individual mandate was the most unpopular aspect of Obamacare. I got rid of it.
I'd like
and we will protect people with
President, I'm the moderator of this
conditions.
debate, and I would like you to let me ask my question, and then you can answer your question. You, in the course of these 4 years, have never come up with a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare, and just this last Thursday, you signed a largely symbolic executive order to protect people with pre-existing conditions 5 days before this debate. So my question, sir, is what is the Trump health care plan?
Fine. Well, first of all, I guess I'm debating you, not him, but that's okay. I'm not surprised. Let me just tell you something, that there's nothing symbolic. I'm cutting drug prices. I'm going with favored nations, which no president has the courage to do because you're going against Big Pharma. Drug prices will be coming down 80 or 90%. You could have done it during your 47-year period in government, but you didn't do it. Nobody's done it. So we're cutting health care. All of the things that we've done, insulin. I'll give you an example. Insulin. It was destroying families, destroying people. The cost. I'm getting it for so cheap. It's like water, you want to know the truth. So cheap. Take a look at all of the drugs what we're doing, prescription drug prices. We're going to allow our governors now to go to other countries to buy drugs because they pay just a tiny fraction.
As I say, this is open discussion.
No, but this is big stuff.
Sir, you'll be happy. I'm about to pick up on one of your points to ask the Vice President, which is he points out that you would like to add a public option to Obamacare, and the argument that he makes and other Republicans make is that that is going to end private insurance.
It is
and
not.
Well, if I can ask you the question, it will
not
end.
What your party says, by the way.
It will end private insurance and create a government takeover of health care.
It does not. It's only for those people who are so poor they qualify for Medicaid. They can get that free in most states, except governors who want to deny people who are poor Medicaid. Anyone who qualifies for Medicare would, Medicaid would automatically be enrolled in the public option. The vast majority of the American people would still not be in that option, number one.
Joe, you agreed with Bernie Sanders, who's far left, on the manifesto, we call it. And that gives you socialized medicine.
Look, hey,
are you saying
I'm not going to listen to him. The fact of the matter is, I beat Bernie Sanders.
Not by much.
I beat him a whole hell of a lot. I'm here standing facing you, old buddy.
Pocahontas would have left 2 days early. You would have lost every primary.
All he knows how to do is
Super Tuesday. You got very lucky.
Here's the deal. I got very lucky. I'm going to get very lucky tonight as well. And tonight I'm going to make sure, because here's the deal. Here's the deal. The fact is that everything he's saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
I want to make sure.
Mr. President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. He has,
You'd be surprised.
You picked
You'd be surprised.
the wrong guy, the wrong night at the wrong time.
Listen, you agreed with Bernie Sanders to the manifesto.
The whole idea.
Let him.
There is no manifesto, number one.
Please let him speak, Mr.
Number
President.
two.
You just lost the left.
Number two.
You just lost the left. You agreed with Bernie Sanders on a plan.
Folks,
absolutely
folks,
agreed
do you
to.
have any
And under that
idea
plan,
what
you have
this clown's
socialized,
doing?
They call it
Mr.
Do you have any do?
Socialized medicine.
Mr.
Well,
President.
I tell you what, he is not for any help for people needing health care. Because he, in fact, already has cost 10 million people their health care that they had from their employers because of his recession. Number one. Number two, there are 20 million people getting health care through Obamacare now that he wants to take it away. He won't ever look you in the eye and say that's what he wants to do. Take it away.
No, I want to give them better health care at a much lower price because
and by the
Obamacare
way, he doesn't know how. He doesn't know how to do that.
I've already fixed it.
He has never offered a plan.
I've already fixed it to an extent.
He has never done a single thing.
As you might know, but probably don't.
Gentlemen, you realize if you're both speaking at the same time,
and it's too expensive.
Let the president. Go ahead, sir.
Obamacare is no good. We made it better, and I had a choice to make very early on. We took away the individual mandate. We guarantee pre-existing conditions, but took away the individual mandate. Listen, this is the way it is. And that destroyed, they shouldn't even call it Obamacare. Then I had a choice to make. Do I let my people run it really well or badly? If I run it badly, they'll probably blame him, but they'll blame me. But more importantly, I want to help people, okay? I said, you got to run it so well. And I just had a meeting with them. They said, the problem is no matter how well you run Obamacare, it's a disaster. It's too expensive. Premiums are too high, and it doesn't work. So we do want to get rid of it. Chris, we want to get rid of it.
I understand it, sir, but I have to give you roughly equal time. Please let the vice president talk.
Good.
He has no plan for health care.
Of course we do.
He sends out wishful thinking. He has executive orders that have no power. He hasn't lowered drug costs for anybody. He's been promising a health care plan since he got elected. He has none, like almost everything else he talks about. He does not have a plan. He doesn't have a plan. And the fact is, this man doesn't know what he's talking about.
All right, I have one final question for you, Mr. Vice President. If Senate Republicans, we were talking originally about the Supreme Court here, if Senate Republicans go ahead and confirm Justice Barrett, there has been talk about ending the filibuster or even packing the court, adding to the 9 justices there. You call this a distraction by the president, but in fact it wasn't brought up by the president. It was brought up by some of your Democratic colleagues in the Congress. So my question to you is, you have refused in the past to talk about it. Are you willing to tell the American people tonight whether or not you will support either ending the filibuster or packing the court?
Whatever position I take on that, that'll become the issue. The issue is the American people should speak. You should go out and vote. You're in voting now. Vote and let your senators know how strongly you feel. Vote now.
You're going to pack the court?
Make sure you, in fact, let people know you're a senator. I'm not going to answer the question
because
the question is
radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe? Who's on your list?
Right, gentlemen, I think
this is so unprecedented.
He's going to pack the court.
We have not going to give a list. We have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? Keep yapping, man.
The people understand, Joe.
They sure
47 years you've done nothing. They understand.
All right. The second subject is COVID-19, which is an awfully serious subject, so let's try to be serious about it. We have had more than 7 million cases of coronavirus in the United States, and more than 200,000 people have died. Even after we produce a vaccine, experts say that it could be months or even years before we come back to anything approaching normal. My question for both of you is, based on what you have said and done so far and what you have said you would do starting in 2021, why should the American people trust you more than your opponent to deal with this public health crisis going forward. In this case, the question goes to you first, sir. 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Good luck. 200,000 dead. As you said, over 7 million infected in the United States. We, in fact, have 4% of the world's population, 20% of the deaths. 40,000 people a day are contracting COVID. In addition to that, about between 750 and 1,000 people a day are dying. When he was presented with that number, he said, it is what it is. Well, it is what it is because you are who you are. That's why it is. The president has no plan. He hasn't laid out anything. He knew all the way back in February how serious this crisis was. He knew it was a deadly disease. What did he do? He's on tape as acknowledging he knew it. He said he didn't tell us or give people a warning of it because he didn't want to panic the American people. You don't panic. He panicked. In addition to that, what did he do? He went in and we were insisting that the Chinese, the people we had on the ground in China should be able to go to Wuhan and determine for themselves how dangerous this was. He did not even ask Xi to do that. He told us what a great job Xi was doing. He said we owe him a debt of gratitude for being so transparent with us. And what did he do then? He then did nothing. He waited and waited and waited. He still doesn't have a plan. Wrong. I laid out back in March exactly what we should be doing. And I laid out again in July what we should be doing. We should be providing all the protective gear possible. We should be providing the money the House has passed in order to be able to go out and get people the help they need to keep their businesses open schools that cost a lot of money. You should get out of your bunker and get out of the sand trap and get in your golf course and go in the Oval Office and bring together the Democrats and Republicans and fund what needs to be done now to save lives.
So if we would have listened to you...
You have 2 minutes, sir.
If we would have listened to you, the country would have been left wide open. Millions of people would have died, not 200,000, and one person is too much. It's China's fault. It should have never happened. They stopped it from going in, but it was China's fault. And by the way, when you talk about numbers, you don't know how many people died in China. You don't know how many people died in Russia. You don't know how many people died in India. They don't exactly give you a straight count, just so you understand. But if you look at what we've done, I closed it, and you said he's xenophobic. He's a racist, and he's xenophobic because you didn't think I should have closed our country. Wait a minute.
It says 2 minutes.
You didn't think we should have closed our country because you thought it was terrible. You wouldn't have closed it for another 2 months. By my doing it early, in fact, Dr. Fauci said, President Trump saved thousands of lives. Many of you Democrat governors said, President Trump did a phenomenal job. We worked with the governor. Oh, really? Go take a look. The governors said I did a phenomenal job. Most of them said that. In fact, people that would not be necessarily on my side said that. President Trump did a phenomenal job. We did. We got the gowns. We got the masks. We made the ventilators. You wouldn't have made ventilators. And now we're weeks away from a vaccine. We're doing therapeutics already. Fewer people are dying when they get sick. Far fewer people are dying. We've done a great job. The only thing I haven't done a good job, and that's because of the fake news. No matter what you say to them, they give you bad press on it. It's just fake news. They give you good press. They give me bad press because that's the way it is, unfortunately. But let me just tell you something. I don't care. I've gotten used to it. But I'll tell you, Joe, you could never have done the job that we did. You don't have it in your blood. You could have never done that job.
I know how to do the job. I know how to get the job
Well, you didn't do very well in swine flu. H1N1, you were a disaster. Your own chief of staff said you were a disaster.
14,000 people died, not 200,000. There was no economic recession.
Sir, you made a
there was no recession.
You made a point. Let him answer.
And there was we didn't shut down the economy. This is his economy he's shut down. The reason it's shut down is because, look, you folks at home, how many of you got up this morning and had an empty chair at the kitchen table because someone died of COVID? How many of you were in a situation where you lost your mom or dad and you couldn't even speak to them? You had a nurse holding a phone up so you could, in fact, say goodbye.
You would have lost far more people. Far more people.
And
you would have been.
And by the way, his own CDC director says we could lose as many as another 200,000 people between now and the end of the year. And he held up. He said, if we just wear a mask, we can save half those numbers. Just a mask. And by the way, in terms of the whole notion of a vaccine, We're for a vaccine, but I don't trust him at all, nor do you. I know you don't. What we trust is a scientist.
You don't
we
trust
Dr.
Johnson
Fauci.
Johnson, Pfizer?
And
okay,
by the way,
gentlemen, let me move on to questions about the future, because you both have touched on two of the questions I'm going to ask. Focusing on the future first, President Trump, you have repeatedly either contradicted or been at odds with some of your government's own top scientists. The week before last, the head of the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Redfield, said it would be summer before the vaccine would become generally available to the public. You said that he was confused and mistaken. Those were your two words.
Yeah.
But Dr. Slaoui, the head of your Operation Warp Speed, has said exactly the same thing. Are they both wrong?
Well, I've spoken to the companies, and we can have it a lot sooner. It's a very political thing, because people like this would rather make it political than save lives.
God.
It is a very political thing. I've spoken to Pfizer. I've spoken to all of the people that you have to speak to. We have great Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and others. They can go faster than that by a lot. Become very political, because the left, or I don't know if I call them left, I don't know what I call them.
The head of your Operation Warp Speed, Dr. Slaoui?
I disagree with him. Yeah, no, I disagree with both of them. And he didn't say that. He said it could be there, but it could also be much sooner. I had him in my office 2 days ago.
He talked about the summer, sir, before it's generally available. Just like
he said it's a possibility that we'll have the answer before November 1st. It could also be after
when it's
that.
generally available.
Well, we're going to deliver it right away. We have the military all set up. Logistically, they're all set up. We have our military that delivers soldiers, and they can do 200,000 a day. They're going to be delivering.
This is the same man
It's
who
all
told
set
you
up.
by Easter this would be gone away. By the warm weather, it'd be gone. Miraculous, like a miracle. And by the way, maybe you could inject some bleach in your arm, and that would take care of it. This is the same man.
That was said sarcastically, you know that. That was said sarcastically.
And so here's the deal. This man is talking about a vaccine. Every serious company is talking about maybe having a vaccine done by the end of the year. But the distribution of that vaccine will not occur until sometime beginning or the middle of next year to get it out, if we get the vaccine. And pray God we will. Pray God we will.
Mr. Vice President, I want to pick up
You'll have the vaccine sooner
I want to pick up on this question, though. You say the public can trust the scientists, but they can't trust President Trump. In fact, you said that again tonight. Your running mate, Senator Harris, goes further, saying the public health experts, quote, will be muzzled, will be suppressed. Given the fact that polls already show that people are concerned about the vaccine and are reluctant to take it, are you and your running mate, Senator Harris, contributing to that fear? No more than the question you just asked him. You pointed out. He puts pressure and disagrees with his own scientists. But you're saying
Everybody
you can't, or Senator Harris is saying you can't trust the scientists.
No, you can trust the scientists. She didn't say that. You can't trust.
She said the public health experts, quote, will be muzzled, will be suppressed.
Well, that's what he's going to try to do. But there's millions of scientists, there's thousands of scientists out there, like here at this great hospital, that don't work for him. Their job doesn't depend on him. That's not, they're the people, and by the way.
I spoke to the scientists that are in charge.
By the way.
They will have the vaccine very soon.
Let him finish.
Do you believe for a moment what he's telling you in light of all the lies he's told you about the whole issue relating to COVID? He still hasn't even acknowledged that he knew this was happening, knew how dangerous it was going to be back in February, and he didn't even tell you. He's on record as saying it. He panicked, or he just looked at the stock market. One of the two, because guess what? A lot of people died, and a lot more are going to die unless he gets a lot smarter, a lot quicker.
So,
Mr. President?
Did you use the word smart? So you said you went to Delaware State, but you forgot the name of your college. You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe. 47 years you've done nothing.
Let's have this debate.
And if you would have had, let me just tell you something, Joe.
No,
if you would have had the charge of what I was put through, I had to close the greatest economy in the history of our country. And by the way, now it's being built again.
You see,
and it's
We're going
going
to get
up
to the
fast.
economy in the next segment, sir.
Okay.
It's going up fast. I
Okay.
look forward to talking.
When it comes to how the virus has been handled so far, the two of you have taken very different approaches, and this is going to affect how the virus is handled going forward by whichever of you ends up becoming the next president. I want to quickly go through several of those. Reopenings. Vice President Biden, you have been much more reluctant than President Trump about reopening the economy and schools. Why, sir?
Because he doesn't have a plan. If I were running, I know what the plan is. You've got to provide these businesses the ability to have the money to be able to reopen with the PPE as well as with the sanitation they need. You have to provide them plastic.
Tell that to Nancy Pelosi.
Well, he's just shush for a minute.
Tell it to Nancy Pelosi and Schumer.
By the way, Chuck. Nancy Pelosi and Schumer, they have a plan. He won't even meet with them. The Republicans won't meet with him in the Senate. And he sits on his golf course. And well, I mean, literally, think about it.
You probably play more than I do, Joe.
What about this question of reopenings and the fact?
Well, he wants to shut down this country, and I want to keep it open. And we did a great thing by shutting it down. Wait a minute, Joe. Let me shut you down for a second, Joe, just for 1 second. He wants to shut down the country. We just went through it. We had to because we didn't know anything about the disease. Now we found that elderly people with heart problems and diabetes and different problems are very, very vulnerable. We learned a lot. Young children aren't. Even younger people aren't. We've learned a lot. But he wants to shut it down. More people will be hurt by continuing. If you look at Pennsylvania, if you look at certain states that have been shut down, they have Democrat governors all. One of the reasons they're shut down is because they want to keep it shut down until after the election on November 3rd.
I want to move on to another subject. I want to move on to another subject.
But those states are not doing well that are shut down right now.
Respond to that.
President Trump, you have begun to increasingly question the effectiveness of masks as a disease preventer. And in fact, recently you have cited the issue of waiters touching their masks and touching plates. Are you questioning
the
efficacy of
masks? You have to understand, if you look, I mean, I have a mask right here. I put a mask on, when I think I need it. Tonight, as an example, everybody's had a test, and you've had social distancing and all of the things that you have to. But I wear masks when needed. When needed, I wear masks.
Okay, let me ask.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen. I will say this.
Vice President Biden, go ahead, sir.
Look, the way to open businesses is give them the wherewithal to be able to open. We provided money.
But I was asking you, sir, about masks.
Well, masks make a big difference. His own head of the CDC said if we just wore masks between now, if everybody wore masks in social distance between now and January, we'd probably save up to 100,000 lives. It matters.
And they've also said the opposite. They've also said
no serious person said the opposite.
Well, look at Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci said the opposite.
He did not say the opposite.
We got a little bit more than a minute left in this segment.
Masks are not good. Then he changed his mind. He said masks good. I'm okay with masks.
I want to ask you both about one last subject, because your different approaches has even affected the way that you have campaigned. President Trump, you're holding large rallies with crowds packed together, thousands of people. Outside, yes, sir, agreed. Vice President Biden, you are holding much smaller events with
nobody will show up.
People with
well, it's true. Nobody shows up to his rallies.
All right. In any case, why you holding the big rallies? Why you not? You go first, sir.
Because people want to hear what I have to say. I mean,
but are you not
done
worried
a great
about
job as a president, and I'll have 25, 35,000 people show up at airports. We use airports.
Are you not worried about
we
the
have a
disease
lot of
issue,
people.
Sir?
Well, so far we have had no problem whatsoever. It's outside. That's a big difference, according to the experts. And we do them outside. We have tremendous crowds, as you see. I mean, and literally on 24 hours notice. And Joe does the circles and has 3 people someplace.
Okay. By the way, did you see one of the last big rallies he had? And a reporter came up to him to ask him a question. He said, no, stand back. Put on your mask. Put on a mask. Have you been tested? I'm way far away from those other people. That's what he said. I can't. I'm going to be okay. He's not worried about you. He's not worried about the people out there breathing in one another.
We've had no negative effect.
No negative effect.
We've had no negative effect. And we've had 35, 40,000 people at these rallies.
Just quickly finish up, because I want to move on to our next.
Yes, I would. He's been totally irresponsible the way in which he has handled the social distancing and people wearing masks, basically encouraged them not to.
All right.
Ben, he's a fool on this.
If you could get the crowds, you would have done the same thing. But you can't. Nobody cares.
Gentlemen, can we move on to the economy?
Yes.
The economy is, I think it's fair to say, recovering faster than expected from the shutdown.
Much faster.
In the second quarter, the unemployment rate fell to 8.4% last month. The Federal Reserve says the hit to growth, which is going to be there, is not going to be nearly as big as they had expected. President Trump, you say we are in a V-shaped recovery. Vice President Biden, you say it's more of a K-shape. What difference does that mean to the American people in terms of the economy? President Trump, in this segment, you go first.
So we built the greatest economy in history. We closed it down because of the China plague. When the plague came in, we closed it down, which was very hard psychologically to do. He didn't think we should close it down, and he was wrong. And again, 2 million people would be dead now instead of still 204,000 people is too much. One person is too much. Should have never happened from China. But what happened is we closed it down, and now we're reopening, and we're doing record business. We had 10.4 million people in a 4-month period that we've put back into the workforce. That's a record the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. And he wants to close down he will shut it down again. He will destroy this country. You know, a lot of people, between drugs and alcohol and depression, when you start shutting it down, you take a look at what's happening at some of your Democrat-run states where they have these tough shutdowns. And I'm telling you, it's because they don't want to open it. One of them came out last week. You saw that. Oh, we're going to open up on November 9th. Why November 9th? Because it's after the election. They think they're hurting us by keeping them closed. They're hurting people. People know what to do. They can social distance. They can wash their hands. They can wear masks. They can do whatever they want. But they got to open these states up. When you look at North Carolina, when you look, and these governors are under siege, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a couple of others, you got to open these states up. It's not fair. You're talking about almost it's like being in prison. And you look at what's going on with divorce, look at what's going on with alcoholism and drugs. It's a very, very sad thing. And he'll close down the whole country. This guy will close down the whole country and destroy our country. Our country is coming back incredibly well, setting records as it does it. We don't need somebody to come in and say, let's shut it down.
All right. Your 2 minutes, sir. We're now moved to you. As I said, posing the question, the president says it's a V-shaped recovery. You say it's a K-shaped recovery. What's the difference?
The difference is millionaires and billionaires like him in the middle of the COVID crisis have done very well. Billionaires have made another $300 billion because of his profligate tax proposal, and he only focused on the market. But you folks at home, you folks living in Scranton and Claymont and all the small towns and working class towns in America, how well are you doing? This guy paid a total of $750 in taxes.
Sir, wait, no, sir, it's just wrong statement. Yeah, I understand. You've agreed to the 2 minutes, so please let him have it.
Do I get my time back? The fact is that he has, in fact, worked on this in a way that he's going to be the first president of the United States to leave office having fewer jobs in his administration than when he became president. Fewer jobs than when he became president. First one in American history. Secondly, the people who have lost their jobs are those people who have been on the front lines, those people who have been saving our lives, those people who have been out there dying, people who've been putting themselves in the way to make sure that we could all try to make it. And the idea that he is insisting that we go forward and open when you have almost half the states in America with a significant increase in COVID deaths and COVID cases in the United States of America. And he wants to open it up more. Why does he want to open it up? Why doesn't he take care of the American? You can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis. And he has no intention of doing anything about making it better for you all at home in terms of your health and your safety. Schools. Why aren't schools open? Because it costs a lot of money to open them safely. You know, they were going to give, his administration was going to give the teachers and school students masks. And then they decided, no, couldn't do that because it's not a national emergency. Not a national emergency. They've done nothing to help small businesses. Nothing. They're closing. 1 in 6 is now gone. He ought to get on the job and take care of the needs of the American people so we can open safely.
All right. Your time is up, sir. Well, we are going to get to...
I have to respond to that.
Well, you both had 2 minutes, sir.
Excuse me, he made a statement.
So did you.
People want their schools, people want their schools open. They don't want to be shut down. They don't want their state shut down. They want their restaurants. I look at New York. It's so sad what's happening in New York. It's almost like a ghost town, and I'm not sure it can ever recover what they've done in New York. People want their places open. They want to get back to their lives. They'll be careful, but they want their schools open. I'm the one that brought back football. By the way, I brought back Big Ten football. It was me, and I'm very happy to do it. And people of Ohio are very proud of me. And you know how I found out? When he took
Gentlemen,
the
we're going to get to your economic plans going forward in a moment. But first, Mr. President, as you well know, there's a new report that in 2016, the year you were elected president, and 2017, your first year as president, that you paid $750 a year in federal income.